Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right, Asking Why podcast, episode number 38. Super excited to have you guys here, you ladies here. So we're going to talk about women's health issues. So we have Mary Kate Cortez from our Ruston office, and we have Dr.
Laurie Lebleu.
There we go, from Ruston, and your office is in Ruston?
I have an office in Ruston as well as in Monroe. So
Okay.
so we cover Lincoln Parish and Ouachita Parish and a good 30, 45-mile radius around all of that.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
That's Louisiana for people who are not listening from
Yeah.
Louisiana. So Mary Kate, tell us who you are and what brings you here and why we have Dr. Lebleu with us.
Try to make it short. Well, I'm one of the counselors in our Ruston office.
You don't have to make it short. We have forever.
We do have forever. I mean, do you want me to give the play-by-play of some degree of how we even got to Ruston?
Yeah, please.
Okay, sure, okay. So I had, Dr. Blue's actually kind of in the midst of some of this in terms of me having babies and also trying to figure out counseling and getting that going as a career. I first started off teaching, and it was not for me. My husband and I had made a deal. I would do 3 years, and I lasted 2 in the school system. I was pretty miserable, so he was like, let's just send you back to school. You've always talked about counseling. Let's just do it. So we did, and then I had 2 quarters left and actually got pregnant with my daughter, and Dr. Lebleu saw us through the whole pregnancy of her. And that I'll kind of put all those pieces together as I kind of go through this, but she was just such a big part of helping us get her here safely, because we were just worried about preterm labor, and I did not even know that was a thing when I got pregnant. I just thought you got pregnant, you looked really cute, because you see all the advertisements, and just it didn't occur to me that there could be problems. And that's where this women's health podcast comes in terms of just helping normalize some of the stuff that's out there, because either we just never even thought about it, or people don't know to talk about it. There's a lot of different reasons. So anyways, had her, and then graduated with my master's in February 2019, and was just trying to figure out what my next steps were going to be. One of the reasons I wanted to do counseling is I could see a potential to make those hours work for me as a mom. And so, got offered a full-time position. I just didn't feel good about it. As a Christian, I would just feel like the Lord was just kind of directing me not to be there. I didn't really know quite how to put words to that. And my husband was very gracious to say, if you just feel like you need to be home right now, let's do that. And there was the potential for a school job, counseling job to come up that fall. And so we were like, let's put all of our eggs in that basket. We're going to trust Jesus. He's leading us there. And just really felt like that's what he had for us. So I got to, spent the summer just kind of banking on this job happening, and then it didn't. And we both had talked.
Is this 2019?
This is 2019. Yeah. And so we had talked about if this does not happen, this is not going to be good for me. And that's that season where I did not get that job and started looking for jobs. I was like, this is how people get depressed. And thank God I know God, because I was like, you have to have a plan in this, because I don't know what else I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And so I had a friend who gave me your card, who's from Shreveport, and I was like, we're not moving to Shreveport. I don't know why he's giving me Clint's number. This isn't happening. And so, but then I was like, I need a job. So then I emailed you, and then you were like, hey, look, let's touch base. But then nothing had come of it at that time. And so I ended up getting a job in home-based therapy. The day I took that job, I found out I was pregnant with my second. And that was not part of the plan.
It's never part of the plan.
It's never part of the plan. I remember calling my husband. I was like, what are you doing? He was like, I'm at cross-country practice. And I was like, okay. He's like, why? I was like, don't worry about it. He's like, you good? I'm like, I'm pregnant. And he was like, why are you telling me this right now? And so that's just, again, the idea of just kind of where I'm at with my profession, and then even having kids and women's health, those are all kind of intersected in this. And so I did 2 months at that job, and I was like, I'm done. I just can't. I don't think I can do this. But I also saw, there was so much trauma in what I was seeing with my clients. And so But I had never been formally trained in that, even in my graduate degree. It's like we learned how to counsel, and I could do cognitive behavior therapy, and I could really talk about people's thoughts and how that was leading them where they were, but I couldn't, when I hear somebody say that they got abused growing up and then they were consistently in abusive relationships, there was something missing from a professional standpoint for me. It's like, I was not taught how to put these pieces together, and it was very frustrating. And so I decided to quit and was like, we'll just figure this out. So I emailed you, and you're like, okay, we'll meet. And I was like, I'm going to drive to Shreveport. My husband's like, you're okay being pregnant and driving to Shreveport? I'm like, let's do this. We're going to do it. Because I saw what you were doing with the integrative wellness, and I was like, that is amazing, to be able to look at the whole body and not just look at just the mental health aspect. And so...
or just symptoms.
Right. And so you didn't know I was pregnant whenever I came in. I was still kind of that, like, did she gain weight or is she pregnant? So you don't ask. So I was kind of, so
I've learned that lesson for sure.
Yeah. And so we had this really great meeting, and I was just so prepared to drive. And you were like, what if we open a practice in Ruston? I almost started crying. I was like, be professional. Do not cry. And so...
Now you could have totally
I could have... I'm like, I'm pregnant. And so... I was just like, that just went above and beyond anything I thought would be possible. So you're kind of listing all the things that would have to happen for this practice to come alive. And I was like, I don't even know how to do that, but okay. Like, yes. Like, I remember even that night you emailed me saying, like, hey, I'm so excited that this could potentially happen. I was like, well, I'm here. Like, I'm on board. And you're like, well, let's get to know each other a little bit before we say yes. I'm like, wow. I just jumped in, and you were like... Hold on. And so even like Stephen came home that night, and we just laughed. We're like, who knew that this could happen? Like, my dream job could be happening as a provisionally licensed professional counselor, which, we've talked about. That was what was so hard about me finding a job, is most places don't take PLPCs because insurance doesn't cover us. Mm-hmm. So that was that rub of like, I really want to do something cool and not just feel like I'm having to take a job just to, we all have to pay our dues to an extent, but I wanted to do something meaningful and that I really cared about, especially being a mom. If I'm going to give my time up, I want it to be worthwhile, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And so we committed to it. And then February 2020, we're like, that was official. We were like, let's, we're going to start this practice. We're going to figure it out. We were already kind of making some connections. And then the pandemic hit. And literally the day of the pandemic, we've always had trouble with just contracting, not knowing if I would have preterm labor or not. And we had talked, I'm not sure if you even remember, but like, you made a comment like, hey, if you keep having cramps, you might have to do a modified bed rest. Well, the lockdown happened. My husband's a teacher, so he's locked down with us. And it actually, like, by the grace of God, as much as I do hate bed rest with a passion, it worked out so well. And then we had enough complications in the middle, like low fluid levels, having to do 48 hours in the hospital. And I remember reading The Body Keeps a Score. It's a great idea to do that while you're in high stress and in a pandemic. And Dr. Lebleu comes in to do her rounds, and she starts taking a picture of the book. And I'm like, when do you have time to read this?
It's categorized.
Yeah. But we kind of got into a cool conversation. Like, it was just that, I tend to kind of already assume with doctors, you're going to be just and there is that medical mindset, but I could see, like, you had this ability to know that there was just so much more than just this one piece, that there's way more to it. So we talked about, like, sometimes you would have clients come in or patients, and even if you talk to them for a few minutes, it helped them so much that it might not just be that prescription that they felt like they needed.
Which is super rare.
Right.
It's really rare.
Unfortunately.
But it's like a breath.
It's changing, maybe.
Yeah,
I hope.
there are a lot more doctors that are being more trauma informed and being more aware, but as a whole,
you don't learn it.
No.
Or you didn't. I'm a more seasoned doctor now, but it's definitely not spent a lot of time on.
Well, and why would a doctor know if therapists don't even know?
Right.
If therapists are getting out of their masters and coming into a career to see people in their offices, but they're never learning about addiction, trauma, and definitely no theology, then why would there be any training for a doctor or a dentist or any other kind of first responder or medical person?
Right.
For sure. And so that was kind of a breath of fresh air for me. I was like, God, maybe I'm here so I can talk to Dr. Lebleu about.
And I do remember that day because I remember when I left, I remember thinking, oh, maybe somebody I can get people to, or, like, it was just different. It was like something that my journey has kind of been in that direction towards more of an integrative wellness type situation over probably the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years. And seeing that, I was like, oh, here, because, you hear about it everywhere else, but in our North Louisiana area, we're a little behind on the times, and you're like reading about it, talking about it. And I was like, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
Maybe we can hook up.
Maybe there's something.
And here we are.
Yeah. And so then the rest of that, my pregnancy with my son was pretty stressful, and he was breech. I feel like even some of his birth, I'm like, it just speaks to who he is as a human being. He is so like,
Definitely.
I love him.
It starts in the womb.
It does. But I mean, he has a mind of his own. Even at 15 months, it's like, my husband's like, dear God, how'd they both end up like you? And
it's funny how they always end up like the other one when they're doing something we don't like.
Right, exactly.
Like, you're a child.
Yeah, right. And Dr. Lebleu was great through, the idea was to see if we could invert him and see if we could do the vaginal delivery and everything. And so, which again was kind of rare to kind of, here's a doctor who's really wanting to listen to what I want. And we're going to try to make this happen, but we know the risk, like we know what could happen. So we even did the epidural and everything just in case an emergency C-section happened. And he was stubborn. He didn't flip at first. I mean, we eventually got him. We were worried that he would, you weren't sure about his heart rate, so we went to go prep for a C-section, but then he was fine, so we were like, okay, we get to do this. And this has literally been the whole pregnancy, like, we're good, we're not good. We're good, we're not good. Mm-hmm. And long story short, basically ended up in an emergency C-section. My epidural was not working, so I had to be put under. And then my husband doesn't know, he's just kind of like out and waiting. And they're like, he's fine, everything's fine, but he's here. And so it was just, that whole experience was...
was that because of COVID or because of the C-section part?
Which thing?
The surgery and him being out.
She got general anesthesia.
Gotcha.
And so we don't let the fathers come in when there's general anesthesia because you're sitting there and your wife's is intubated. And that's a little more traumatic for him as well.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what happened there.
And it was quick. Like, I don't even know if y'all would have even had a chance to even come, tell him what was even
Yeah.
It was just how it all went down. And so that was, I think, as a woman, you kind of have this idea of what things are going to look like. And when it doesn't happen, you're like, huh. I've talked to you about this. I was like, I just never pictured having a C-section. I know that sounds really weird. And this podcast won't all be about, birth stories, I promise.
No, it's great. Keep
going. It was just kind of I feel like as a real woman, you have a vaginal delivery. And that sounds weird to say that. But I was like, this was what I was going to do. This was how it was going to happen. And I had no control. And I think that was the scariest part. You don't have control. And so I think we see that in all aspects of our lives. And so, even women's health, we can say that, and men might automatically tune out, but this involves men. Even for my husband, it's he was a full-time single dad for a little bit. I was on bed rest. It was thank you for doing all that. And he really doesn't try to complain, which that's, something we'll have to continue to work through. Just because he's going to always say, well, you had it worse. And it's well, you have a part of this, it's kind of and I think in Dr. Lebleu, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in is you have that ability to engage both the mom and the dad.
Right.
Because dads can feel like they're put on the outside, or men in general, but they're so involved and Clint, this, of just you watch your wife or your kids and you're trying to figure out what do I do? And so, especially when this didn't turn out the way that I thought that it would. And so,
you feel really helpless. I think my brother-in-law died of brain cancer 8 years ago, and he was so positive all the way to the end. And it was even, not that it was easy on him, but sometimes when you're the one going through it, you're just kind of surviving it or dealing with it, and you have these things going on in your head and your body that you have control over to some degree, and a lot of stuff you don't. But as an outsider, sometimes it's the difficulty part for you is that you can do nothing. Mm-hmm. And so you take all the responsibility and the time and the energy and the stress, and you try to support and you try to emotionally, be there and be present while they suffer. And that's a suffering of itself,
right.
And that's traumatic, in and of itself. And I think, you're right that so many times, the worst thing you can do is compare traumas, but the reality is they're both very traumatic. They just have different consequences long term.
And, this is definitely more a cultural idea we're starting to develop, but men have an experience, what does it look like to engage guys to say, this was hard for you, and it's okay for you to say that and to talk about it, but that's also hard.
Oh, yeah.
Probably weren't ever taught how to do that. My husband and I have those conversations daily. I'm like, what are you feeling? And he's like, I don't know. And so, even in our marriages, whenever I realize the Enneagram has helped me understand even my own stress in that time of okay, whenever I'm a 9, so when I get stressed, I freeze. I don't know what to do. So I really kind of I'm like, don't come near me. Don't do anything. I'm gonna sit on this couch and keep this baby in. You understand?
That's right.
That's it. And so that affected our marriage. It's so it's just all these different pieces kind of come together, but there's not always great words for it because not everybody knows that we're all being impacted. Mm-hmm. And so
you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I think part of doing the podcast is educating people either to validate what their experience was like so they can let go of the shame and the stuff that they have and go, oh, me too. Or if you haven't had kids, if you're a younger woman and you haven't had kids or you're going to have another one, that you can, be aware of this stuff and how it's going to affect the future, and find the right doctors and find the right therapists so that you can, minimize your suffering. You're not going to do away with it, but make it a little better.
Right. There's people who want to help, come alongside you.
And get it.
Right. And so, anyways, the practice had kind of been on hold at that point. That's back to the practice, your question. Then God just really brought everything together. Like, I kind of was like, I would really like to just spend 12 weeks recovering, enjoying this baby. And then literally, like, started to really develop a client base after that, like in some very cool ways of like, thank you, Lord, that you're kind of doing this. And then we didn't have any other counselors at that point, really. I mean, we were still trying to figure out what that was going to look like, and we didn't have an office space yet.
Yeah, because I remember you stressing out, like thinking I was going to be frustrated or whatever. Yeah. And I was like, I have no expectations. But again, once I got past me with a therapy office, everything else was lagniappe. I'm like, this is all just bonus. So, doing, Ruston and having that there and having you is, like I told you from the beginning, I was just thankful to have it. So I was good to pace it out however God was going to work it out. And certainly wasn't, going through all this stuff with my wife and our FPIs and, special needs kids and all that stuff. I mean, that's one thing, right? The more the more empathy and patience you can have with people, because, I knew you were struggling and having a hard time. And, there's no pressure from me, which I knew would hopefully end up in you thriving and growing, even better, instead of compressing it and pressuring you and being like, well, hold on, you got to do that,
Right. This is just rare,
I was about to say, not everybody gets that.
Right. Sure. Right. I mean,
absolutely.
That's what also come from teaching, which has helped me. And any clients that are teachers, I'm like, I get it. They don't know boundaries. And they don't know how to just like, it's okay for you to be human and just to have these things that just happen. So I was always very thankful for that you were so okay with just kind of like, you kind of get to where you feel like you need to be, and then I feel like, but also the Lord's timing. Like, I remember trying to work so hard to get this practice, kind of developing meetings pre-pandemic, and nothing was really coming of it. And then we had a meeting in Ruston in like August, and then I felt the Lord started working. More meetings were coming up, and then Tyler came on board. Then you called me, you're like, well, now it's Olivia. She's a CSAT. And so it was just kind of like, and then my friend Rachel, who had already talked about the year before, I was like, hey, do you want to come and like work with me? She's like, no. And I was like, it'd be really fun. And then a year later, she's like, hey, I think I'm ready for this. And so this integrated wellness piece started coming together. Then Dr. David Wheeler finds this house that could be a, an office space. And I was like, you just can't make this stuff up. It's just, it starts coming together. And so then you had approached me about the idea of a podcast, and you were like, who could we bring on that it could engage Ruston community? And I was like, Dr. Lebleu, naturally, my OB, and so I think it was that conversation, and just, I think as I thought more, and like you're saying, like life experiences helps you be more empathetic. It has made me, I think, a better counselor. I think when you go through anything, having kids, doing 100%. Anything, it's just, I think my mindset before kids was, why don't you just try harder? Just do better. That was always my, I grew up as an athlete. I ran in college. It was just always like, I'm going to make myself do this. That runs out at some point. Like, you can't do that forever. And so that would make me a very hard counselor. I was like, why don't you just do better?
Right.
Like,
stop it.
Just stop it.
Just fix it.
Right. And so that's just all to say, kind of my heart for even doing some of this, you allowing me to just come up with who I wanted for this podcast and everything, was like, the idea of women's health is like, what happens when what you kind of expected to happen doesn't, and how you see that in your field. And I'll ask some more questions in a minute, and how it just impacts not just women, but men. And not even just with having babies. And that's what we talked about even at a meeting a few weeks ago, was like, it's not just having babies, it's menopause, it's the lifespan. And so this world's tough. And so how do we put some like words to some of these experiences so people know what to be looking for and that they're not alone? I think that's my main thing, is like, we're not alone in this. Like, nothing is more soothing to my soul. One, when my husband comes home and like loses, like frustrated with the kids too, I'm like, oh, you get it. Like, it's not just me. And then, or if I, talk to other friends and I'm like, wow, people weren't kidding when they said marriage and kids were hard, and they're like, like, it's not easy for us either. There's something soothing about that, instead of just being like, oh, I'm great. We're great. Right. We're fine. It's like, no, we're not. Right. And so, and that's even, I think, Clint, for your heart with the podcast, the asking why. It's like, well, let's go to the root of some of this and just kind of what's going on for us in some of these. And, we could go all day on just like the root messages. That's like what we do with our time. It's like, what did that mean to you? And so I just think through my own experiences, is like, I would just love to kind of dive a little bit more into just how did these parts of life that you didn't expect that end up getting thrown at you impact you, and what do we do about it from there?
That's good stuff. You did great. Proud of you.
Thanks.
I am. I'm super proud of you, honestly. Seeing you come from,
You're like, honestly,
as a PLPC, and coming in and being super nervous. And, I know you faced a lot of doubt and fear, and then you had life cert. I mean, all the things you just painted to see you, kind of sitting here and being able to finally do this podcast, and that we have full office, where last week you're emailing me like, we need another play therapist because I'm super booked. That's incredible. And so, I think the thing I'd want people to look at in your story, and then it'll probably tie into the rest of it, is, God is working constantly in ways that we can never see, and that he's going to tie in down the road in ways that you can never imagine. And I think, that trusting his plan and trusting in him, and that his plans are better than our plans and his ways are better than our ways, you just spelled that out. And in the middle, it's hard.
Oh, and I didn't even fully believe it beforehand. I think there's that sense of like, would God really give me, like, I'm like, I don't really deserve the best of the best, but like, I mean, I would like it. But like, is he going to do these things? And so you just kind of wonder, like, so I was in that place. So I think whenever I saw like this job come to fruition, it's actually given me a lot of hope. And like, even now there's some things we're trying to pursue as a family that we're just kind of getting blocked. And it's like, okay, Lord, like, you've been faithful to show up before, and you're going to do it again. And
when you remember the wins, that's very important.
It helps.
So, Dr. Lebleu, tell us enough about Mary.
Mary.
Right. It's not about me.
But you got to like Mary.
Yes, that's right. So, tell us about you and kind of your background and who you are. And
So I grew up in Texas, so born and raised in West Texas, but all my family was from Louisiana. My mom and dad were from Louisiana. My mom's from Gina. My dad was from Leesville, so kind of central Louisiana.
Your last name is Lebleu.
It is Lebleu. Yeah. Now, that is my maiden name. Basley is my married name. Okay. I have my alter ego to hide, so I can hide when I need to hide, which doesn't happen in Ruston. But
not at all.
But yeah, so I grew up in West Texas, and then we moved. My parents got divorced when I was young, and my stepdad worked for the FDIC, so we moved every 4 years, just wherever it was. So grew up in Odessa, moved to San Antonio, lived there for 4 years, and then my junior year of high school, we got moved to Connecticut, which was like we talked earlier, definitely a little bit of a culture shock. So we moved to Connecticut, did 2 years there, graduated from high school in Connecticut, played volleyball, and was trying to figure out kind of what to do. Volleyball was not big in the Northeast, huge female sport in Texas, and so kind of trying to figure out. I did well in Connecticut playing volleyball.
Yeah, when you stood up and I shook my hand, I was like, "Oh, she's tall." Yeah.
I had some height, but they get really tall.
Oh,
I'm like the shorter of the people. But up there, they, it was just different. You had a lot of Ivy League schools, tons and tons of small liberal arts schools. Where growing up in Texas, you went to UT, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and that was kind of it. SMU and TCU weren't even real big at that time, in Baylor. But so was up there, didn't know any of the schools, knew my family was going to probably move again. And so all my grandparents, aunts, uncles, everyone was in Louisiana. My dad was in Lafayette. And so kind of decided I don't want to stay up here, but I don't want to be all by myself, and had lost my in-state residency in Texas. So Louisiana, I was in-state. And so sent out videos and got to play volleyball at Louisiana Tech, and just literally never saw it, never really looked into it. So I'm going to Louisiana Tech. And that's where I ended up. So went to Tech, started off in 2-a-days, and actually was hurt and quit volleyball right when I got down there. And then, it was, and my mom dropped me off at my dorm and went back to Connecticut. So probably that was my trauma at that time.
Like, don't leave me here.
Don't leave me here. Well, because we'd moved so much over my life. My mom and I, that's my person. That was just always my person, that no matter what happened, it's hard to move as a female when you're a young girl from place to place to place. And so when she left, I think it was just all of it together, but ended up finding a crew, joined a sorority for a little while, then got out of that, and then went back to volleyball, and then played volleyball for the next, 2.5 years. And then was going to do physical therapy. That was my thing. I was sports. I was like, I'm going to be a PT. Actually, my thing in my high school yearbook was I'm going to be the physical therapist for the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
You knew exactly what you wanted.
I was going to be a physical therapist for the Dallas Cowboys. And then
like under your picture?
Yeah, where it says those little things.
Yeah.
But then we actually my dad's best friend was a physical therapist in Leesville, and I went and worked with him, and I just did not enjoy it. Like, I did it, and I was like, this is not for me. Like, this is not really what I thought it was going to be. You know, in your mind, you see some things, you watch a video or movie, and the physical therapist does this great therapy for this guy that goes back and becomes this, you know, that's not really
National
how it works.
champ.
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't
It's like
work that
everyday
way.
people.
Goal.
Yeah, no, it's like I got my hip fixed, and
Right.
I'm going to sit and watch you do these exercises. And
Right.
I was like, ooh, this is not my
Like, this is
personality.
not exciting.
At all. So, but my dad's best friend, Jimmy, he said, you need to be a doctor. And I was like, I can't be a doctor. You have to be rich to be a doctor, you know? I was like, I can't do that. We don't, you know, and he's like, you get loans. Everybody has loans. And I was like, I don't know, how do I do that? So I went back my junior year of college. I had done that. And I went back and I talked to my mentor, what do you call him? Like the counselor person.
Advisor.
Advisor, yeah. So I went back and talked to my advisor, and I was like, I think I want to go to med school. And he was like, it's kind of late. And I was like,
So you're how old then?
that was my junior year of college, so I'm three years out.
20,
You know,
23, 22?
oh no, like 20.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
yeah, in college.
Okay.
And so, so he was like, well, I had a fitness and wellness background. He's like, but you did mainly sciences, so we can probably flip it. And I went all summers, always did summers. I had a lot of hours. And so he's like, I think we can do it. So I was like, well, let's just do it. What the heck? You know?
Why not?
Why not? Let's see what happens. And so I took my MCAT, got in, and then applied. Well, then I had all these issues with that, because I technically graduated from Connecticut, so they considered me an out-of-state resident for Louisiana when it came to the med school. So they were like, you're going to have to apply. Now, during this time, my mom moved to Colorado. They're like, you're going to have to apply to med school in Connecticut. And I was like, I'm not going up there, you know? And so after a long roundabout, they finally accepted that my dad was from Louisiana, that, you know, he'd paid taxes. And so they let me into an in-state medical school.
What a
in
bunch of
Louisiana.
bureaucracy.
It is. It's
Gosh.
crazy, you know,
pay
but there's so
taxes.
many.
Yeah.
I know, but it was. They were like, okay, we'll count it, you know? But I think in Louisiana, for the state schools, it's because they need people to stay. They
Right.
don't want you to come and then leave, you know? But so I got into med school, and I was going to be a pediatric oncologist.
Whoa.
That's what I was going to do, because I saw Patch Adams, I think. But I do love cancer. I think cancer is fascinating. I just enjoy studying it. I enjoy the process of learning about it. So that's what I wanted to be. And then I did my first pediatric rounds, and I happened to be, I got lucky. This was a blessing. I was on with our pediatric oncologist. He was our attending. So he had tons of pediatric oncology on. And I had one little boy who we got so close. I was a med student. And he died. And I was like, cannot do this. Cannot do this. But I didn't have, you know, when you don't, it's so bad that you have to choose your life when you're 20. Like,
Yeah,
what are you
it's
going to be when you grow up,
ridiculous.
when you're 20? And I had no children. I had grandparents. I knew I didn't want to do, you know, regular oncology. I can't watch my grandparents die.
Right.
I could watch kids, but, you
Right.
know, it's like,
You're like, kids are fine.
yeah. And then I did it, and I was like, I can't do this. Not tough enough at all. So then I was completely lost because I did not. Now, I loved psychology, you know, and so I started thinking about, I was like, maybe I want to do psychiatry, just because it always fascinated me. And then I did my first surgery rotation, and I was like, oh, I love cutting on people. Like, it was like,
I'm meant for this.
I'm meant for that. But I had no idea. Like, you know, it just in my mind, I was never going to be a surgeon. That wasn't, it grossed me out. I just wasn't. And I did it the first time, and it was so meticulous, and I just loved it. So now I had a problem, though, because I liked people and seeing people and talking to people and learning them and meeting them and doing that. And then I really wanted to operate. And so my very last rotation was OBGYN, which I never in a million years was ever going to do, because who wants to work with women all day? And so I was like, I don't want to do this. And then I did it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is all of it together. Like,
loved it?
Oh, I loved it. And I never, like, it was such my personality. Like, now looking back, I'm like, you were like the classic OBGYN. But it was just when you know, in your mind, it was just like, oh, crazy, mean women, you know, from childhood of moving all the time and happened to kind of fit back into a group. I was like, oh, I don't want to work with women. And then when I did it, it's like I have grandmas and daughters and granddaughters, and then I get to go operate. And you're in such a, I mean, I do a lot of mental health with that. Probably not well, because I'm not trained, but for the things that I
We're
have
gonna
to
work on that.
I know. I'm not trained to do some of the things that I need lots of time to do for women. But yeah, so it was the best of both worlds. So finished med school, applied to residency, got in at Wake Forest in North Carolina. So I moved to North Carolina, and I was there 4 years. My husband I actually met. He coached at Louisiana Tech my last year of college, of medical school. You know, I have to get through the 4 years, different 4 years. So I was in my last year in medical school. He was coaching at Louisiana Tech. And so I moved to North Carolina. He switched to scouting and scouted, and he lived in Ohio, but could travel because scouts travel. And so we got married my last year of residency, and then got pregnant towards the end, and then moved back to Monroe. Moved to Monroe and had a baby. So I started my job, and I was 32 weeks pregnant. And so it's like, hey, I'm going to be y'all's new doctor, and I'm going to take 8 weeks off coming up soon.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks.
But I'm going to be back in a little bit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was funny. You know, Chris is from outside of Philadelphia. And so he really, I mean, he was at Ruston and enjoyed tech, and then at that time was kind of trying to get back into coaching. So it was kind of where do you want to go? Where do we want to go? We just picked somewhere. And then we were actually going to move to Houston. He had an offer in Houston, and then got an opportunity to come back to Monroe. St. Francis was great about doing a loan payback program, and I was like, we got to do this, you know. Those loans that guy had told me about all those years are still there. Yeah. And so...
a couple of them.
Yeah. A couple, you know, we're 12 years down the road now. But, so yeah, and then kind of thoughts that we would leave one day and just go, and here we are, almost, fixing to be 13 years. My oldest will be 13 next month.
And you have how many kiddos?
I have 3 boys.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
boy
an
life.
8-year-old. It's boy life in our house, yeah, and a boy dog. I'm going to get a girl something.
Like, I need some estrogen.
Well, I always laugh, though. As I said, I think God gave me all boys because I have women all day.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like, you needed a balance.
I needed some of the other when I got after 5.
Right. It's probably good for your soul.
It is.
Like.
It is. Because I don't know. I can't imagine having a daughter sometimes. I'm like, I think I would overanalyze everything all day. I'm like, oh, we got to do this. Oh, we got
Like, you know too much.
And now I just say, I'm like, I'm going to teach these boys how to be really good husbands because
awesome.
I watch what my women go through, and I'm like, we are not going to do this.
Yeah, that's how I feel about mine too. I'm just constantly like, this is how men act, and this is how we don't act. And,
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think it's just hard not to. I mean, I just watch it, you know, and I mean from all aspects, you know, from abuse to just neglect to absolute adorable husbands to fathers. It's just amazing how much it affects women on a regular basis. You know, what happens in those relationships. So.
Did you say something about Yale before the podcast?
Oh, well, no, I played volleyball in Connecticut. And so
okay.
that's, you know, I traveled to New Haven. I actually played club ball, you know, there
cool.
at all those different schools. So it was just an experience to get to go to all those places. But no, I did not go to Yale.
Gotcha. I love volleyball.
I parked in their parking lot.
It's a you parked in their parking lot.
You're like, I've been to Yale.
I've been to Yale.
I have a T-shirt and a sticker. That's right.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
I love when I see people with like Yale or Harvard shirts on. I'm like,
But did you?
yeah.
Yeah.
But did you? All right, so Mary Kay gets to be in charge today. I told her she's going to do the questioning, so I get to just hang out for the first time ever. So go ahead.
Just relax.
Hit it up. Yeah, I mean, I'll
kick
talk,
backs.
I'm sure, but
Can't help. Yeah, I know. I was actually excited about this. Both of y'all could talk so much. I was like, we could go on so many tangents.
I'll have to do another one.
Part 2. Okay. So, talking about, this is not specifically to like women's health, but just for you in general, just as we kind of get to know you a little bit more, kind of how you got here, how do you juggle your job and family life?
That's you know, that changes also as you get older and your children get older. I think, you know, I would say that's probably my biggest struggle that I have gone, you know, this 13 years when I think of the day I started to where I am today, sitting right now. You know, it's, I think it's difficult. I do think that my profession is probably one of the harder being an OBGYN because your call's very different. You know, there's rarely any other maybe transplant, you know, surgeons or something that you literally, when somebody calls, it's at that moment right now and time matters kind of stuff. So, and the way we do it in Monroe, Ruston, is that you're patient's doctor all the time, where a lot of places you're going to be in a group practice. So like you would be a patient of the woman's clinic. So you would see all the different doctors, where we don't do that at this time at the woman's clinic. And so for me, that means you don't, you know, like you didn't know the other 6 doctors. And so you take on a lot more ownership and kind of responsibility for the patients. And a lot of that comes with the guilt of, I don't want to not be there for her because she hasn't met Dr. Wilson or Dr. Kluger or Dr. whoever, you know. And so for me, that has been the biggest, hardest challenge for me, is deciding who I choose, you know. And so I think balance from that standpoint in the beginning, I wasn't as busy, so it wasn't as hard. And I mean, this sounds horrible, but my children were little, And I don't think they noticed as much. A lot of nap time. We had a nanny at the house. My husband was coaching at that time, so he wasn't around a lot. So then it was kind of like you were just going through the motions. But then they get to the point where they're like, why are you in scrubs still, Mom? And so my children are traumatized from scrubs. So if I come home and they're not off in a certain amount of time, they know I'm going back out. And so we have to work through that, So I think it's changed. So probably, I would say 5 years ago, my practice was booming out of control. It was just slammed, and I wasn't home much. And I think you hit that point in your career. I was, I took on too much because the doctor, what did you call me in the Enneagram thing?
Oh, you're an 8.
An 8. The 8 in me was going to go and conquer all of it, So I was, chief of staff of this hospital and board of this thing and this, but it was just, I think, potential was there. The older people were tired of it. They'd already done it, and I was the new person.
They're probably happy to give it to you.
And you learn that. You learn that fast. But so I was doing so much on the outside, but in my mind, I was like, man, I'm rocking it. Like, I'm doing this, and I was doing a good job at work, but then I feel like at home, my poor husband, was probably getting ignored and was. And then my kids were, and they're on the back burner of what happens as long as I can get to the weekend, so that part really got hard. And so about 5 years ago, I stopped, and I was like, I remember a friend giving me a book, and it was because I told her, I was like, I just don't feel like I'm doing it right. Like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. I just don't know that I'm going to be as proud of this later as I am right now.
Man, that's such a deep, good point to get to in life.
It is. Yeah. It was a big moment, And so she gave me a book. It was called The Praying Wife. And I read that, and I was like, oh, yeah. I got to reframe some of the stuff, like I got to do some stuff different. And so that was the time when I realized, I was like, I'm going to die, and my kids, they're going to put my name on something, and they're going to say Dr. Lebleu this and Dr. Lebleu that. And then, Mommy Vasley, Miss Vasley. Yeah, she wasn't around much. And I was like, okay, that's got to switch. So in 2018, I think it was 18, I had decided we were going to leave. We moved to Pennsylvania, took a job up there, and got there with more of a, like an Ochsner type situation, more of a systems program. And it just wasn't the right move for us. When I got there, it was not what we expected it to be. So kind of my husband looked at us and he's like, I think we did the wrong move, because I think we were more running maybe from what we needed to kind of fix and work on versus saying we've got to stay here or we've got this and make it work here. And it probably could have worked there with time, but things just, it didn't line up. Like, it was kind of like how you said, I kind of felt like I prayed for a change and then maybe forced the change versus waiting to see what God was bringing in the change. And that's a hard...
Oh, man, it's a hard balance.
It's a hard thing to figure out sometimes. So, we left there.
I remember you telling me when you were leaving. I was like, you're what? No, you're not. And you were like, you can either switch to another doctor or stay with me. I'm staying with you. And we're just going to see what happens. And, literally, Isabella came the day after you left. You wrote me a doctor's note. I was like, Isabella, I don't think you understand the time crunch we're under.
Yeah, like jump up and down.
And then I remember when we all heard, it's Ruston. We're like, Dr. Lebleu's coming back. We're like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah, it was quick.
Everybody was so excited.
I know. It was only 6 months. I mean, but I knew, and I still look at it some days and I'm like, maybe it would have worked out, but there was just something there. And I mean, we moved back and I came back saying, I'm not getting back into that rigmarole of just
doing everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and then my grandfather got sick during COVID and passed away, who is my person. And so I was like, I would not have been able to take off and do the things I did had I been up there. So I think it worked out.
Was that your mom's dad?
That was my mom's dad, yeah. And so then I also, in Pennsylvania, where I think things were not going well there for where I joined, that all got better after I left because I think they saw whoa, we just lost somebody that was going to do good things for us. And I was like, I can't work like this. So I feel like maybe I was like a little key to kind of helping them, and then it worked out well for us in the end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't screw God's plan up.
Right.
He's going to do what he's going to do, and you either get to learn along the way and see how much he loves you and cares about you and is shaping you during it, or you're blind to it and then wake up to it.
Right.
It's one of those things. And so he's going to use, what Satan uses for evil, for good, one way or the other. We just get to either be aware of it or,
Right. And I think, too,
knocks us in the head.
I don't know that I would have done it had I not left. Mm-hmm. I made the decision, but it's going to be so hard to just cut everything off and say, never mind, everything. I need to cut it all in half. I don't think that would have happened. And by leaving, it just allowed me enough time to figure out I was home with the boys. This is so much more important, it allowed me with my husband for him to see that I do care, and
you do love me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but it was just all of that, and so I don't know that I would have been able to turn it off or change it if I hadn't have gotten out of it for just took a breath.
You're too in it.
It's real. It is, and I mean, just like you saying. I mean, and every single one of your patients looking at you, going, "But you're not gonna. What do you mean you can't? You just can't say no. I mean, you're a doctor. You're supposed to take care of everybody."
I had again, the idea of I feel relief. I mean, and Clint told you this. Whenever you're like, "Hey, take time for your family and do these things," and I have to remind myself of those things. No, this is a good thing to either get time to go work out and be with my kids and do these things that are enjoyable. Mm-hmm. But even seeing you scale back, I think we all sensed it to an extent. Whenever I admire that. It's oh, good. That's almost permission for the rest of us.
Definitely.
That means that here's a job that's very high demand and somebody's saying no. Yeah. I think we kind of get on this train and life takes off. We've all seen it with COVID. Whenever we got locked down, everyone's oh, that was so nice. And now life's full blown again. It's we get to say to an extent what we're going to do and not do. So it's so cool to see people who do have busy lives have the chance to stop and say, no, we're not going to do that. So the rest of us going to get to say, we get to do that too. If they're doing it, we can do that. You know?
And you had to, I mean, I literally, I was they can just say I'm weak. I just have to stop. I'm I'm not doing any of it well, it was enough, and it was maybe above average, but it's still and what were my goals. I said, I'm not doing it anymore. Everybody's okay. Nobody's hurt. Everyone felt a little loved, but never did I feel like I gave it everything I could to this. Really just blew it out of the water. Mm-hmm. It had just gotten so, I mean, it was just too much volume, too much time across the board.
Not worth
and
it.
So now, now it's getting busy again, and I literally just did another scale back because it all took off again, you know.
That's how it happens.
And it just gets crazy.
I feel you.
It does, and you do. And and for us, for me, it's 9 months. So everyone I see this month, they're there for 9 months. So it's I started seeing what was happening for the fall, and I was I can't do it again. It's happening. My husband's you're disappearing again. And I was okay. So, I literally called my business manager and said, okay, no more of this, got to cut it back to this. Mm-hmm. And so I'll start seeing the fruits of that in January because it's that far out that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but the balance is hard, and my oldest just started in junior high this week, and I was I have got to be here. I have to be around. I know. It's
crazy.
It's big. It's big.
It's coming
He's
for us
so
sooner
cute.
than later.
I know.
This is insane.
I know. It is. And so I just want to see it all. They're big sports players, and so it's
What do they play?
We play hockey. We're big hockey players up here with the junior Mudbugs. So
nice.
They do that, and then baseball and football, and then they play soccer. Kind of, but that's not their thing. That's just to keep them busy. And cross country, that's started. They like cross country because that's for the little one.
A Saturday.
Have you read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry? You should check that out.
Oh, I'll have to look at that.
John Mark Comer. But it's just one of the examples. It says that Jesus, he was always busy. He was, schedule was packed. He had stuff to do all the time, but he was never in a hurry.
Right.
So he could stop to heal the woman who was bleeding. He could stop to go to the next town to heal the blind man. He can go to the well and heal the man who couldn't walk.
Right.
So it's not. There's nothing wrong with. I hate the word busy when because it sounds 50 years ago, if you could play golf all day, you were rich.
Right.
And today, if you're killing yourself, and working yourself to the bone, then you're rich. So. But hurry is different than busy. Hurry is stressed out, can't manage it. Everything's crazy. You don't have any time for rest. You don't have any time to go work out. You don't have any time for your kids. Yeah. And so you're making all this income and you have this career and you have all these things. But then, like you said, you look back and the thing that you wanted the most, right? The thing that you prayed for, the thing you wanted to nurture and care for, you've left for, I'll do that next month. I'll do that next weekend. I'll do that. And that never comes.
Right.
And it's just easy in our culture. I think the idea is you're supposed to do everything 110%, and nobody really stops to look at, okay, but how's a family life kind of coming? I think it's kind of all expected of us. When you do a job, you do all of it. You don't get to do it just a little bit.
Right.
And then it's just, I was going somewhere else with that, and I totally blanked out on it. But it's just kind of, it's hard to be able to put that priorities to know, what do I want that to look like? And, man, I was going somewhere else with that, and I totally forgot.
Well, and I think women, I feel like, I always say I'm going to get knocked off at something one day because I literally feel I always laugh because I feel like my it was drilled into me. You can do anything you want. You can be the best, the greatest, the biggest. And so in your mind, and it might be my personality as well, is I wanted to be the best doctor and popular and the CEO. You know, it's just like to go. And then I'm like, and you can be your mom and you can be the working mom and you can do. I just don't think you can do it all, you know, and you hit this point where they say, yeah, you can. And I'm like, you can't do it all. Like, you can't do it all. It's impossible. Like, it is impossible to do all of it.
We weren't meant to do it all.
And that's where I feel like now, like I always say, they'll come and tell me to come talk to a bunch of young women. I'm going to be like, ooh, I think you should find that thing you really like and just do really good at that. Like, if you want it to be your mom, if you want it to be work and you're not really interested in kids, that's great too. But like, it's such a hard balance. And I mean, and from what you were saying with it being me, I feel like people look at me and they say, oh, but you do all, and I'm like, no, it's no different whether you're staying at home. Like, you don't have to be the popular OBGYN and say, well, you're different. I'm like, I'm the same as you. Like, you're tired and exhausted. I'm tired and exhausted. They're in totally different, you know, ways, but it's the exact same thing. You're trying to make everything you can do in this situation, and I'm trying to do it all here. And in the end, we're both just staring at each other going, oh, did we even do anything right today?
It's like we don't set ourselves up for success or our kids up for success. We're kind of like, especially our little girls are like, you could do it all. You can be everything. And it's like,
don't tell them. You can be the president.
Yeah, it was like, but you're saying like if you're saying yes to something, I've heard like you're also saying no to something else.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's like this idea of you could try to do everything, but it's going to cost something somewhere else. And so
eventually you'll figure out that that's not what you wanted.
Well, yeah, and who
Right.
are you trying to make happy? And I think this goes back to a theological perspective of we're the body of Christ.
Right.
Some people are really awesome at doing podcasts and talking and speaking and doing all those kind of things. But I promise you don't want me in the office answering the phones and taking down. Nobody's going to be seen.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to remember where I wrote it down. My wallet's going to be somewhere where I can't find it. You know,
like
like
somebody called.
Yeah,
Right.
a person called. Their name was Charlie, Mark. I don't remember, but they had a problem.
Yeah.
And
You
they
should
want
call
to see
them.
somebody.
Well, and I always said that with the business office. They're like, well, we couldn't do this. I'm like, if it was up to me, nobody'd pay their bills.
Exactly.
Because, like, I just feel bad.
Yeah,
And they're
you're
like,
like, "It's
and I'm like,
fine."
well, what am I supposed to do? Tell her, see ya.
Right.
You didn't pay your bills, you're out. Good luck. I was
Right.
like, no, we'll work it out.
We have a loan forgiveness program.
I'm like, sorry.
Hey, kids, we won't eat this week, but this lady needs a C-section.
But she's going to have a baby in
Yeah.
3 months. So, but
Right,
it is.
right.
But there's somebody that does that part.
But nobody models that for young girls, especially, you know, and I would say because of, you know, generations of war that we've had in America, we'll just stay that far. We can go way back. But, you know, we've had men who have been traumatized and don't know how to connect and don't know how to be, you know, dads in the way that biblically we're called to do it. And then we've seen, you know, that be a culture of suffering in the household for men and women, and divorce rate, you know, for both of us at least, you know, divorce
Yeah.
being a big thing that happens in childhood that's extremely traumatic.
Did you
So-
just take me out of?
I wasn't sure if you were or not.
Divorce. Oh no, my parents aren't divorced.
That's
I
right.
thought you meant like generationally. Like you're too
You're
young.
out.
No, I didn't take you out. I didn't know if your parents were divorced. I didn't think they
No.
were. But my point is that, you know, you have all this generational epigenetic stuff playing into the current, and we don't teach women, we don't teach men any of this stuff. You know, we make these big blanket statements about you can be anything and you can be the best, and what they hear is then I have to.
Right.
Right.
And then it's always this constant chasing our tail of if I finally get here, I'll be content, or I'll make my parents proud, or I'll, you know, I have to work and have a kid, or I have to stay home to be a good mother. You know, it's all
Right.
that dynamic. I
And
mean,
we
I hear it in here
compare.
every day. You know,
And we
Yeah.
compare, like, not even on purpose, but it's like, you know, people, you know, even when I ask people, I'm like, what do you do? And they're like, well, I stay at home. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
Like, don't say it
I
proudly.
congratulated a friend. I'm like, that's great. You made a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that could be so hard.
But it's, you know, or the one that, you know, I haven't had kids because I work too hard. And I'm like, that's okay too. You know, like, but as long as you're okay with it.
Yeah, is it congruent?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Are you trying to be an eye when you're a toe? You know, like
Right.
you know, if you're a toe, be the best toe you can ever be.
Right.
But make sure that that's congruent with who God is calling you to be, and you know, within the realm of what your skills are, and you know, all that stuff.
And I think that's one of the harder things. And I mean, I feel like, you know, there is a lot with women having more things, but I always say God made a woman and a man for a reason, and I don't want to be a man. But sometimes I feel like from childhood had kind of focused in on being more of that. And maybe not childhood, maybe even a little bit older than that, but I hit a point where it was like, I'm going to get it. I'm going to conquer it. I'm going to beat it. I'm going to do it. And it was like goal setting, but it just became an area that I had to reach. And
it's such a competitive. Whenever you're raised in a sports environment, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's kind of. I think that's even like I was even talking to a client. I was like, even that sports world's probably not great because we're like, if you really care, this is what you're going to do to go get it. And it's kind of like, and if you don't, then you must not care. And I'm like, that's not true. That's just too black and white.
Yeah.
To say it that way. And so I think we get that rub at some point. We're kind of like, no, that doesn't mean that I don't care. It just means my priorities are different. And that's okay for that to be the case.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so back to the work balance is, it's constant work. I mean, some days I feel real balanced and I'll hit a period where I'm like, I'm doing it right now. And then I'll hit a period where I'm like, not doing it as good, whether it's the job or at home. Like in the summers when the boys are home, I mean, I take a lot of vacation. And I do sometimes feel like I'm not as good a doctor, not from a standpoint of someone being hurt, but just where my patients don't get as much attention because my children are at home and I have that for a short period of time. And this is our family time. And like, I have to do it. Like, this is what I have to do, you know? And then there's other times, like right now they're starting school and this is, the fall's the baby boom time and I'm gone a lot. I mean, it's just, there's more babies in the fall and, and they see it and everybody sees it. And then I have to start figuring it out again.
Everybody's home for summer.
It is.
Spring.
It's spring. And all those
That's right.
flowers and all the animals are happy and everybody makes babies in the spring.
That's right.
This is how it works.
Yep.
But I mean, I appreciate your honesty on it, just because I think
I'm an open book.
Yeah, but I love that because I think it's easy, especially in your job. It can feel like, do I need to try to have it all together? Because we do have this idea of this is what doctors do and what they look like and how they do their lives, and in general, because we do compare about who's doing what. And there's shame for all of us. And like, do I need to be working? Do I not need to be working? So just even the honesty say it's not easy either way. Like I continue to come back to friends and we're like, I don't think there's an easy solution either way. The grass is always greener on the other side. And we're just trying to figure it out.
Right.
And love our kids.
Right.
The best way.
I had a patient the other day that was telling me, a little bit older than me, but kind of telling her story. And I mean, she was, she needed help. Like she was lost but it was my story, but she's not an OBGYN, So she's talking and I start to talk to her and and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so unprofessional. But it was like, I needed to tell her what I'm telling myself. Right. And I looked at her and I said, I am doing the exact same thing you're doing right now. And I just need to tell you it's going to work out, but I felt like I totally was so unprofessional, but it just came out. But I did. I was like, we're in the same walk of life. You're not a doctor and I'm not what you are, but we are doing the exact same thing right now.
Oh man, I don't think it's unprofessional to be human.
Yeah.
I think we've lost that a lot in professional settings of like, we can't be empathetic, we can't connect, we can't share anything about ourselves, or somehow that's unethical or whatever. And obviously there's a spectrum.
Right.
But man.
Yeah. But then you worry too, though, like, I don't want y'all to ever think, my patients to ever think like, oh, she's not good right now. Like, she's not going to be able to do something, or she's not, her mind's, it's like that.
Any helping because there's times I think like, okay, if I tear up, right? Because there's times like there are people's stories impact me to a certain like,
oh my gosh.
And just grieving with them.
Right.
Like, because life should not have been that way, And so, but you're right. I mean, there's that sense of, okay, I'm supposed to be taking care of you.
Right. And like, I'm good. I'm going to be able to do your paps when you're fine. Don't worry.
Right.
Don't worry. I still got it. I can see through there.
Right. I trained for this.
You go to a C-section and, they're like, oh, Dr. Lebleu looks a little off today. And I'm like, I'm not off. I'm good. I'm really good. I can get this machine part of this. But, those are the parts where sometimes I feel like you feel like you don't want to, you need to hide it.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to authenticity and, our parent, like just talking about parenting, like they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be real and authentic.
Right.
They need you to apologize. They need to hear you say that you're tired. They need you to, But because what happens is when we don't ever do that, then they expect us to be perfect. And I would say the same thing about pastors, leaders, doctors, therapists. There's a level where we have to be human, and we don't want to be put up on that pedestal of having it all together. Because guess what people do? Then they expect that they can do that.
Right.
They look to you to go, well, if I'm going to be a doctor, if I'm going to be a good woman or a strong woman, then I can never say that I'm weak. I can never say that I'm struggling. I can never say that I had a hard day.
Right.
But when you do, you give permission, right, for them to be like, okay, I can still be tired. I can still be worried. I can still be trying to find balance and still do a good enough job.
Right.
Right. So it's being good enough, not perfect.
Right.
Yeah. I cried in front of my kid the other day because she put me over the edge. I had to start crying. I was like, I'm done. Like, she was about to start crying. I don't think she knew what to do with it. I'm like, Mommy, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, this is me.
It is.
Like, it's just those, you're human.
Oh,
you can
yeah.
only, and
Absolutely.
and as parents, we can feel like we have to do things perfectly. It's like, even, like, I get rubbed the wrong way when I hear people say, I work to show my daughter that she can do this too much. She doesn't care. like she may, but like she wants you home, or he wants you home. They want not home, something like all
Well,
the
it's
time.
like we're always trying
present.
to set an example.
Yeah.
Where sometimes I'm like, the example is just to sit down and listen to them and play a game.
We get to know them.
Get to know them. Like, listen, let them tell your story and put the phone away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God
Like,
might
put
not
it
need
away.
to be a doctor.
No.
Yeah, or work, or not work, or whatever. Like, if you don't know your kid, then all you're doing is trying to set an example that's not who they're going to be.
Right.
And how many times do we hear in our offices people, becoming doctors, becoming therapists, becoming lawyers because their dad was or their mom was.
Right.
And they felt like everybody has to do this in our family. This is what we do, but it's not who they are. And
Yeah.
so eventually it crashes and burns.
Right.
The
And that's
pressure.
what I always think about my mom. My mom, that side of the family, I mean, we're lovey. Like still my cousins, all of us will all pile on the couch under a blanket together. It's just, we're touchy-feely, lovey people. And my kids are like that. They have no boundaries when it comes to something. Like, they'll be in there and they'll be like, hey, Mom, and they're in the bed. And then somebody comes over that, like all the babysitters I've had, they'll get in, they want to get in the blanket with me. Like we're just those people. But I don't know that, like, when Chris's family's not like that as much. And so they're always like, whoa. And I'm like, but I want... And now my kids are like that, and our family, my mom's side, that side is like that. And I was like, and I want them to be like that. Like, I want them to be okay
With affection.
hugging. Like, I remember seeing when my oldest had to figure out that you can't hug your friends anymore. Like, you're supposed to do a fist bump or something, and Cole would be like, bye, and he'd get ready to hug. And I was like, don't hug them. Don't hug.
You're like, I haven't been over this with you yet.
Yeah, don't hug them. You're 12 now. You can't hug anymore. But it was like he knew.
I still hug my friends and tell them I love them.
But I think you get back to that.
No, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, during the teenage years, it's like...
But he knew, like, to show affection, like, he loves his friends, so he was just going to hug them because we
Right.
hug.
Right.
And they were like...
That's so
"Oh."
good, though. Do you know how many clients I'm like, who hugged you? And they're like,
I think that's
no one. I'm
huge.
like, no. So no one showed you affect. We've talked about this. Like, you ask those kind of basic questions where it's kind of
Yeah.
like,
I've never thought of it ever in their life.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And I don't think my husband, their family is not, I mean, they're great, but they're not as touchy-feely. And I mean, you can
sense
see
it.
my husband when we're all like, and he's like, oh, y'all are all under the one blanket in the same corner on top of each other? And I'm like, yeah, we are. We're like dogs.
And I feel so
The
secure
puppies are
right
all-
now.
Oh, yeah.
The puppies are all in
We
here.
laugh all the time. We if my wife and I are together and we go in somewhere and we kind of generally know somebody, they'll come and hug me and she's like, hey, she sticks her hands out and shakes their hand. And used to, and when we were first married, it would bother me, but that's her being authentic.
Yeah.
Now, if she knows you more than like 3 times, she's going to hug you and then she's
Right.
going to hug you forever. And she's
Right.
really touchy-feely if she knows you and
Yeah.
trusts you. But my instinct is just, what's up? I'll do, I'll
That's
take
how I
whatever.
am.
And she's more like, no, I'm going to shake your hand at first. And then after we've met a couple times, like, then maybe I'll hug you.
Oh, I know.
But it's like, you have to just figure out, instead of, right, in marriage or family, instead of judging or critiquing that somebody's not like that, help them to be authentic in however it is
Yeah.
that they, I feel
What
like I'm
they're-
beating the authenticity horse today, but
That's the theme.
yeah, but I mean, that's the thing.
But it's real. I mean, but I think that's going through all this, that when I was reviewing all these questions that we maybe would talk about, it really
We
went
maybe
down.
would.
Yeah.
Well, maybe would. I think we're on
We
two.
got 45 minutes and we're
I was like,
left and we have two.
I'm
we're on
sorry.
number
Question 2.
This was me brainstorming when I said
No,
the
this is
questions.
great.
I don't know.
Hey,
This-
like I said, I think I told you we could do it.
We've probably answered some of them already without
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
But with that authenticity part, that is for females. And, when you asked, one of your questions was going over the lifespan of what do you see? And that is what's been crazy for me, is seeing what I see my teenagers going through right now. And, social media. I mean, I don't want to harp that because it's just, it's a no-brainer to me. But what they're having to go through with social media and authenticity and what they're needing and what they're not getting and what they're thinking is so bad. And then you get into, I literally was going through, I was like, okay, so if I had to categorize everybody. So I was like, okay, we got our teen years.
Right.
And it's this, they start their periods and then they have to deal with that. And then all these emotions, the emotions are extremely big. And then the moms don't know what to do. So then they have this relationship with their moms that can go really bad or really good. So I deal with that a lot. The moms bring them in. She needs her hormones, and then
Fix her hormones.
the daughter's sitting here rolling her eyes at the mom, or the mom's pressuring her and the daughter's so scared she doesn't know what to do, so there's this whole situation where I'm like, okay, I got to make sure you trust me, but I need you to trust your mom. You know, so you have
You
that.
were doing therapy. It's literally like what we're kind of like,
Oh,
how do we kind of land in the middle here?
I mean, it's all the time.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I do. And then you get to the 20-something, or the college girls, you know, it's just protect them. Gosh, I just try to teach them to be smart and stay in good situations, you know. And then you get to the 20s where these girls are going out and they're getting their jobs and their friends are getting married. And so now they're stressed because, am I going to have babies? And when am I going to have babies? And what do I do? And what?
The timeline.
I mean, I had a patient
And they're
come in.
still babies.
They are, but, you know, and I will say that was a different thing when I was in Pennsylvania, is when I went to the Northeast. People didn't have babies till they were 35. Like, that was the norm. And if somebody got pregnant in their 20s, they were like,
Why?
oh, she's having a baby. I'm like, I don't know, 30 down here, everybody's starting to talk about freezing their eggs. With I'm like, you're fine. You got time.
Like, take a deep breath. The stress might actually be worse for you.
Right.
Like,
But it's been, you know, but the 20s is that time period where it's just like there's so much comparison of, am I living up? I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have children. I should be here already, you know? And then you hit the 30s where it's like you're having babies and everybody, about 30 to 30, you know, 28 to 33, 30 to 35, you know, it's kind of like, I've just had a baby. Everybody's having fun. Like, we're still having fun. Everybody's young. Babies are young. And then you hit 35 to 42 when all the babies start to get into activities. And now, you know, you and your husband are drowning. His job's getting busier, you're needing more help, your job's getting busier, the kids need more time, they have to be places, and everything's a mess. Like, 35
Like,
to
how did we get
43 is like, for women. Like, I see it all the time. Divorce rates, I don't look at those numbers, but I'm telling you, it's high right there. Y'all probably look at those numbers, but that's a high time. And
Which usually 7 years in, you know.
Yeah, it is.
About right. You have, you know,
Yeah,
a kid or
depending
two,
if-
and yeah.
And that's the time period where it's just, I feel like I have these same conversations 6 times a day, which is, you're okay. Like, you're number 6 today that is having this exact same problem, you know?
like, you're not alone in having this be
Right.
the issue.
And it's the body image, you know, now we're done having babies, and so now I don't like my body.
Do not turn back.
No,
the way that it did
and it's not
pre-baby.
going. And that's important to know.
We all think you do.
Rarely are you going to look like you did.
Right.
It takes a lot of work.
Right.
A lot of
We're
money.
all kind of like, this is going to happen, you
Right.
know? And it's like, it's okay, but it's not. And also, I like, our mom's like, I don't want the 18-year-old version of myself. I appreciate who I am more now. I'm scared to say my age in case my clients listen. My 29-year-old self more than I did in college. But
Right.
we have this, you know, pressure to, like,
Right.
my husband's like, who is they? Who is pressuring you to look a certain way? I was like,
And
I
you can't
don't know,
even-
Stephen. They are.
But really, they is you.
Yeah.
Right.
It really is. Like, they is you.
Mm-hmm.
You are pressuring yourself to be something. Your husband, I mean, and I'm saying in general, obviously there's always people, but your husband's not pressuring you to look like you did. He just wants you to be happy. You know, but you feel like you need to look different because, you know, it's just what you're always supposed to look. You're supposed to look better. You know, you feel like you're supposed to do something different from a mom standpoint. You know, I laugh that the Pinterest mom are to be everything, you know, which, I mean, that's there. And there's certain things. I mean, I made the posters for my kids to go to school the other day that, you know, I'm going to 6th grade and I'm like, that's it for the year. I won't do it again.
Oh, I don't have it in me.
I do it once a year.
I have all my friends, like, we're in the stage where everybody has newborn pictures and your birth pictures, and I'm like, I'm so tired. I'm like, I don't have time to call anybody.
Yeah.
So I've just, like, have accepted as a mom, I'm okay not being that. I have a certain amount of energy I'm going to give each day, and that's not it.
Right.
And so, but I think it's okay to say, you don't
that's-
need to be those things.
That's
It's
figuring
not,
it out.
you
And
know?
some people kill it in that area, and they do everybody else's pictures for them, and
I
they
know.
love it. And those
They get
moms,
life from it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it goes back to figuring out who
You're
you've
on.
been made to be.
But that's
you
the
know?
point of what I was saying is that is
Yeah.
it. That's you've got to, it's going to change, you know, and that's where I feel like, that's what I love about my job is watching. I remember the girl that came in when she was 15 and now I'm delivering her baby and I'm like, you've grown and you've
Yeah.
changed. And I've seen some go really good and some go bad, you know, that, you know, not bad, but things go bad. And so it's just that authenticity of knowing what you want, like what, and I mean, I am Christian based in prayer and opening up to that I think is so important because you can get lost in what you want is not what you wanted or needed, but you didn't even know it.
Well, what
Yeah,
an
that's
amazing
really
space
good.
for you to be able to disciple women, you know, to be a Christian, to do that ministry in your office as an OBGYN, because you're getting to prepare them and educate them and help them in ways that other people aren't, you know, and
Right.
point them
Right.
towards the truth and help them to see that, like, your worth and value is not tied into all this nonsense.
Right. And that's what, I mean, and I kind of, and that's where I think for us talking together is where I struggle is they'll come in and I have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes. And I mean, every now and then I know, like, you get the rest of the afternoon and everybody's going to wait or what, because it's bad. But, it's like I have 5 minutes and I'm looking and I'm like, I need you to come back every week for the next 6 weeks to make sure we're moving forward, and I can't do that and they can't do that. It's not how I'm set up. I'm a 5 minute, you see this many people and it's not, you don't get an hour. I mean, you can get an hour, but it's not going to go well for the other 14 people that are sitting outside if you get an hour. And that's where, for me, I struggle is trying to figure out to tell them what I want. You need to do this, 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 and this. I give them an outline, and now I'm like, and then I need you to go see Mary Kate so she can hold you accountable for that.
Yes.
Because that's where, but then when you go and say, well, I think you need to see I've thrown around there. Have you have a counselor, therapist, life coach, friend? I don't know what to call them, because the minute you throw it in, whatever, when you throw that in, they look at you and they're like, number one, I don't have time. Nobody has time for anything. They don't have time to work out. They can't afford it. They don't have time for it. They don't want to need it.
Although, what the new stat is on being on your phone, that the average American spends 13.3 hours a day on their phone.
Oh, my Lord.
Over the 35-year lifespan, that's 44 years that the average person moving forward will spend on looking at a screen during the day.
Sad.
It shouldn't be that way.
Well, when people tell me they don't have time is what I mean. Like,
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's like 15 of that. Go sit on your porch with a cup of coffee, a tea, and watch the birds. Watch the squirrels run across, because I can promise you your stress level will go down if you spent 15 minutes not on that phone, but sitting outside and listening to birds and taking some deep breaths. Like that, and that's where I start with a lot of patients is I'm like, I want you to take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That is it, to go outside and sit down. I mean, I had a lady the other day and I taught her belly breathing. 2 minutes. Good. 2 minutes. I was like, I don't have time for this.
I can't even tell my clients to do that. I'm like, just breathe.
But that's what I told her. I was like, 2 minutes. I was like, okay, we're going to practice this real quick. I don't have time for this. 2 minutes. Here we go. I'm going to do this. And I just said, but I did just tell, she just needed a way to kind of find something. But those are the kind of things where the integrative wellness comes in so big, is because for me, I am not set up. Insurance is not set up. My clinic is not set up to do that. Now, I would love it. That's kind of where
your dream.
Yeah, that's my dream. But it's just, that's the thing where women, I don't take care of men, so I really don't feel like I can talk about it, but they need it too.
Absolutely.
They do. But for women, I'm like, this is who they need. I'm like, they need me to come in and say, okay, you're going to come once a week, and we're going to do exercise and health one week, and we're going to do meditation or some type of spiritualness one week, and then 1 week we're going to talk about community and who you hung out with that made you better. Not who you hung out with that wasn't healthy, but who and then we're going to do 1 day of just medicine. We're going to do health today, and that's like, we all need that.
Yeah, to slow down.
Yes, and take the time. But that's why I put all over my little notes for you is slow down. Slow down and live. Like, just live, because we're not living. We're racing through it really quick and just trying to check boxes. We're in a hurry.
It makes me think of that Alabama song, I'm in a hurry to get things done, and I rush and rush till life's no fun.
That's true.
All I really got to do is live and die, but I'm in a hurry and don't know why.
They had it in the 80s. And here we are. And we're in 2021 and we
they
still
had hurry in the 80s?
I think that was from the 80s.
Yes, probably 80s or 90s. Yeah.
That was such a good
It was a mullet, so probably later.
Yeah.
It was a mullet.
I'm just playing the video through my head.
But that's...
Mullets are coming back.
But, and then
they're
we
back. They're not, the teenagers.
The teenagers,
crowd.
It's real bad.
Oh, gosh. I can't. No mullets.
But I like how you kind of condense, because even as I was writing that, I was like, well, one, I was almost writing from both of our perspectives. I'm like, okay, not everybody's where Clint and Mary Kate are. Like, either having babies or trying to figure out kids, or like, so I was like, okay, let's look at the lifespan. So I love how you kind of condensed that, like, there's so much hurry that nobody's slowing down to, one, be okay individually, but even in their relationships, like mom and daughters coming in, like, hey, just fix her. It's like, why don't you just take the time to be with her for a little bit,
right?
And it's like,
and it does, and it takes a lot, and you'll see it. I mean, but I didn't get to the 40s, but that's the menopause. I mean, your body changes, you start feeling less like yourself, your hormones change, your kids go to college, and all of a sudden you're sitting here going, well, crud. Now what am I going to do with myself?
Right.
And then you look over at your spouse and you go, who are you?
You don't know who they are.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them don't. And I'm like, I had a lady the other day. I said, do you remember why y'all got married? Do you remember? Because I do a lot of marriage counseling, not with the man, but with the woman. Of here's what we're going to try today.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you remember why you married him? And she was like, that was a long time ago. And I said, well, y'all go back and get silly. Like, get silly like you when you were 18. Just goofy silly. And that's what I always tell them. Like, literally just do something silly and y'all will laugh and you'll find it again,
Enjoy
or you may
each other.
not. You may look and say, I don't know why I married him. And then you got to go call Mary Kate again.
Olivia.
Whoever.
Yeah. Somebody.
Right.
And then you get what's funny though, is the women who I always think need the least, the 60s are kind of the same thing, because that's just, everything changes. But the 70 and 80-year-old women, happy. They're really happy. It's something that happens in your 70s. They're just comfortable. And it's because, I don't know if it's because they're not chasing kids around. A lot of them, their husbands have passed away, but they're just comfortable with.
It was our fault.
No, but I'm like, they're not. There's just
You're gonna
something.
throw that in
Gone,
there.
your
They
husbands are
find
dead,
us-
and you're about to die, so you're
They're
extremely...
just that was bad, didn't it?
No.
But it was just that they're alone, but they're not sad.
Content.
They're content. I did that. Okay.
Oh, it's
Edit
so
that
good.
out.
No,
Edit
it's
that
great.
out.
That's awesome.
You're like, so there's a correlation.
I told you I don't do men.
No, it's fine.
But I think that also speaks to maybe doing enough life, and you're like, okay, I've done all these things and it hasn't worked. It's like what you're even speaking to of, I'm going to keep going and going until I get here. Okay, well, I did that and that didn't work. So I'm going to keep going and going until I get here. Okay, and I'm still not content. And ultimately it comes back to the Lord and saying, like, Lord, how do I get contentment in you? But life does that to you. Whereas, like, even when I have clients who look at me, even asking us a question about their kids, I'm like, here's the thing. Life has a way of molding them.
Yeah.
And helping them get there
Right.
in ways that, as a parent, you're not going to be able to force on your children. And so, but the Lord does that with us. Like he molds us in ways that I think that
Right.
it sounds like, which I'm not there yet, but
No.
like 70s or 80s.
Well, but I do think
Got a
that.
while.
Yeah.
Got a little
yeah.
bit.
I tell you, just slow down.
Don't
But they
hurry.
do. I mean, I think in that point, though, men have a tendency as they get older. I do see that sometimes men get a little angrier of the younger generation. Women don't seem to do that. They just kind of get content with, I don't know. Like they're just happy, and that works both ways, but it's kind of when men retire, I think sometimes they get lost not having anything to do, where women kind of are sitting around going, well, he's home or he's not here, and I'm just kind of content with being here, I don't know. I just noticed that a lot.
Yeah.
When I was writing this out, I was sitting there thinking about the 70s, and I was like, they're all happy. Like, they're really happy. They come in and they're just happy. And maybe it's, the women in their 70s had a rough life early on. Like things are different than what we haven't been through. Depressions in the 90s. Like we didn't go through all that. So for them, they're like, I'm good.
Yeah.
So it's just a different,
Yeah.
I don't know, different experience of what hard was. You hear all that stuff about, from your grandpas. That, you think it's hard, but it really...
Walked up the hill barefoot both ways in the snow.
Yeah.
Have you seen it? There was like a meme like that during the snowpocalypse. I was like, is this the snow my grandmother was talking about?
Yeah. So good.
But
Yeah.
that's good though. It's just good to hear that perspective.
Yeah.
Cause I haven't, that's not what that's what I was interested in. Is like, what do you see in your job and kind of
Yeah.
with women?
But that's what I see. It really is. But that is, I think where you're getting to, you're not there yet. But that 35 to 45, I feel like, and then 45, different problems, but then 45 to 60, that maybe even 55, that's where I see the most kind of real struggle,
Yeah, I think in our culture especially, because we've put off so much, and then we're dealing with it then,
Right.
for a majority. And I would hope that what people can get out of us talking about this is that, we don't have to wait until we're 70 or 80 to be content.
No.
To be
Please let me be content way before that.
Yeah.
Right. But I think it takes reframing life and our perspectives and somebody telling us like, hey, don't go for these goals. I had a high schooler here. I've been seeing her since she's 11. She's graduating, going to LSU, amazing kid. And I've gotten to see her for a long time
Right.
grow in these little stages. And she was stressing out about grades. She's making a 4.0 and she's stressing out about getting an A, a 93 instead of 100. And it's all that pressure of, well, if I don't make 100, then I can't go to LSU, then I can't go to grad school, then I can't get my doctorate. And then, so we just went through, I was like, well, what's that going to get you? Like at the end of the day, what's that actually achieve? Like, well, money and success. Well, what is success? What do you want that to look like? Do you
Right.
want kids? Do you want to be married? Do you want, and it's just nobody stops, especially if they don't go to therapy,
Right.
or meet with somebody,
Right.
spiritual guide, doctor who
Well,
will
like
say
I said,
it, whoever.
I
And
don't
you
know
get
what to
be
call
all
it, but
of
there needs to be somebody.
Right. But to stop and actually go, okay, well, what is all this for? Because if you get all of that and you think that's going to bring you happiness and success, I can guarantee you that it's not.
Right.
And so we just have to, I think, especially for women who are listening, what I'd love to do is look internally and work through that stuff and go, what's for me? You know, what's going to make me content?
Right.
Maybe I need to talk about this. Maybe I don't need to be my mom. Maybe I don't need to strive to not be my mom.
Right.
You know, let me just figure out, you know, there are other women out there that are healthy, who are educated, who want to support you and work with you and help you find that balance. You know,
Right.
I don't think we ever find it, but we strive for it.
But
That's, I mean, I've
definitely
had,
do it better. You know, like
Yeah.
you might never be perfect balance, but you can do better at it.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
I'll ask my client. I always have to preface with my clients, don't think I'm crazy, but what voice is in your head that's urging you to do that? And I don't mean like, are you just hearing something like, is it your mom, your dad, a coach? Like, who is that that's getting, I mean, because we all have that, right? Like, if we all stop and we're like, why am I doing this? And so it's almost, I mean, it's kind of sounds what you're saying, like, who's the one kind of helping that's,
What's pushing you?
yeah,
that way?
pushing you to do that. And it's like, is that where you even want to go? And so I think that's just worth all of us to stop, especially if we look at our world and just how many loud voices. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know, to look at that.
Good.
To pivot a little bit, I mean, this sounds really abrupt, but if we were to kind of go back to even like help people in terms of tangible, I think there's a lot of tangible things they can take away in terms of just being introspective and even the idea of being authentic. I think we've really talked about that a good bit. But if you were to, one of the questions I had, even just things that people may not know to be aware of when they go through different stages, that when they come up, like even if we were, and this is very specific to like postpartum or even pregnancy, if you were, what characteristics do you see women with postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, and what do you see? Because I hear from a lot of even like other women, like, I didn't know I had this.
Right.
Until I maybe had a second. I was like, oh, that wasn't normal. Or like, you know.
Right. So postpartum depression, I mean, that's, you know, highest risk for it is going to be just any history of anxiety or depression. And I mean, it's usually not just one, you know, anxiety, I would definitely say 100% you're going to see more of, you know, but a lot of times the two do go together, you know. Postpartum anxiety, there's, you know, the times of, am I doing it right? Scared about the baby, not feeding the baby right. Breastfeeding adds in an entire different thing. I always say I can tell whether it's going to go good or bad based on how well the breastfeeding went. You know, the patient wants to breastfeed and it goes bad. I'm like, nah, they're going down the bad path. And it goes well, and I show up at 6 weeks and everything's perfect, you know. So the breastfeeding really, and there's so much pressure on that now. You know, it's great. I love it. I want you to do it, but it's like if you don't do it well, it's like you're a failure. Like and nobody says that to them, but it's like you're a failure. But I think it's because it's on every. You have to breastfeed. You have to breastfeed.
That going back to the expectation of here's what this is what's supposed to happen.
Right.
I'm supposed to have a baby. I'm supposed to breastfeed this baby, and it's going to be great. Nobody tells you if they have a latch issue or if they have a tongue tie or if it's just you have mastitis and you know,
triggering me over here.
Yeah, you're like, okay, we're good. We can move on.
And watching the husbands not be able to help their wives.
yeah.
And so, I mean, I've had husbands call the office and be like, she's not good. Please check on her.
Well, and I'm also like, you know, to some degree, you're just kind of a dumb dude, and you're like, oh, I thought you women doctors knew all about these things. You know, we get like 14 weeks in, and the doctor's like, another doctor's like, oh, well, he has a lip and tongue tie, and my wife's had mastitis 4 times, and I'm like, well, I definitely wouldn't have known that. You know what I mean? Like, who's supposed to know this stuff and tell my wife so that we don't have the last, 14 weeks of our life?
Right. And that's the thing is, you know, the ACOG, which is our American College of Gynecology, is going into calling it the 4th trimester, which is the postpartum period, because I mean, literally, you have a baby, and I come in and see you for 10 minutes. After that, the next 2 days, and then you go home. Well, your milk's not in.
Yep.
Your baby's barely awake yet. You know, they don't cry until the day they go.
Nobody tells you what it's like when your milk comes in.
No, yeah. It's just...
8 weeks, they don't stop sleeping bad. Everybody's like, my baby sleeps so good. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
How old is it? 3 weeks, so it's still in the womb, essentially.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like nobody... And, I mean, I can't go to your house. You know, like, it doesn't work. I mean, I could, but, you know, it's not set up that way. It's not how we do it in America, you know?
Right.
And so it's such a situation. And so...
We can get on a long tangent.
Oh, yeah, don't get me started on that one. Well, and that's been where the midwives have come in, and
Yeah.
everybody, you know, which I have a whole spiel on that. But it's like, we have one lactation specialist in our area that goes to the houses. I mean, you have to pay, but she comes out and spends time, and she's available by phone for a certain amount of time. Well, we have one. The stuff that's at the hospital is not adequate because, again, we're in the same boat. Nothing's in. Your milk's not in. Your baby's still asleep. I mean, if it's a boy, it got a circumcision, and it'll be asleep for the next 48 hours, you know? And then the moms are panicking, and it's just, you know, the baby's screaming. And, of course, if a baby's screaming, they're hungry. No matter what happens, they're always hungry. So you're trying to get the baby on. And so all that leads to anxiety, you know? And I tell patients all the time. I mean, and I had it with my second one, and mine was a little bit of a breastfeeding issue, but it was really, I had a grumpy baby. That first 2 weeks, he just cried, and my other baby wasn't like that. And then I couldn't balance them both, and my practice was so busy when I had my second child, and I was stressed about that, and they were calling me at home, and I mean, I just was kind of, and my best friend's an OBGYN in Arkansas, and she was like, she called and she said, "Hey, what you doing?" And I'm crying again. And she's like, "What's your pharmacy?" And I was like, "Why do you need my pharmacy?" She's like, "Because you're obviously not going to get any help, so I'm going to call you in some meds." You know? And it was at that moment that I finally realized, like, oh, I'm not okay. This isn't okay. And I remember my mom needing to go home. She had come down and stayed, and I was like, he doesn't need you. Your husband doesn't need you. I need you. He's a grown man. I mean, I was like a mess. And then she literally told me that, and I went and picked the pills up. And then, like, the next day, I was like, I got it. I'm going to be okay. But it was like 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. And that's usually when, you know, you kind of, the switch flips and you're like, okay, that's where the marker, I think, for where you go from kind of that baby blues, a little bit of anxiety, to true postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Because that first 2 weeks is an adjustment period. You know, it just takes time.
So what would it have been like had you been in therapy before?
I think, I think everybody needs therapy. I do. I really do. I think it sounds silly, but I really think everybody needs time to talk about what's going on. And I think if you'd met with somebody who had the time, and I feel like that's where I fail my patients all the time, is having the time to sit with them with the expectations. But then I worry if I say, okay, now listen. Now, I always tell them, I'm like, you're going to go in your bathroom and you're going to cry. And if you stay in there for more than 15 minutes crying and you feel like you want to go back every hour, then you need to call me, because that's the hiding spot. Like, I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and then they sit and they just cry, and it fall apart. You know, like, or you get in the shower and you're like, I don't want to get out of the shower, because I know when I go out of the shower, I got to face the world. Like, I got to go back out there and do this again. And then the nighttime, I always tell them, I'm like, nighttime, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and you know you got to feed multiple times, and everyone else is asleep, and it's dark, and it's lonely, and it's scary, and it's a hard time. And when those nights start that you dread it so bad, I said, I need a phone call. You know, but had they, like, it's one of those things where I feel like, had you been able to know that if this starts happening, I can call somebody, my therapist, and I'll have an hour that I can leave my house and just go and say, I'm not good, I'm just going to cry in your office. That would be huge, you know, like, to have that established already, because...
Well, that's what I was thinking.
You can't get anybody in. When they call me and say, I need help, guess what? I'm like, well, you got a 4-month waiting list right now. You know, like, it's very difficult to get people into therapy quickly, you know, like, I mean, and then, it's just like doctors. Not all of them are great, you know, so then finding the great therapist. It's true. I mean, and so...
Even as a counselor trying to go to counseling, you're kind of like, who do I trust?
Right.
And who's going to do this well?
And, you know, it's kind of like you said, where you were like, you just got to tough it out. You know, and I'm like, they're not in a state that somebody can say that to them.
No, there's no
like,
toughing it out.
Right there, we're not in the tough out stage. They might be there in 4 or 5 weeks, but right now we're not. So I do think that would be something, you know, that would be good. But it's, again, setting money. And, I mean, you know, it's hard. It's hard. I feel like if I could, you know, devise an entire new way to be pregnant and have a baby, like, what all the things I would have a yoga teacher, I would have someone that did meditation, I would have a lactation person that would come out afterwards.
That would be amazing.
You know, like, if you could set up this perfect thing, which is kind of what a midwife does, but then you think, how many babies do a midwife deliver a week? And I mean, it's not many.
Just pull that towards you, the mic toward you, and there you go, perfect.
Okay, but how many? A midwife delivers 3 babies a month? I deliver, 35. So it's like, the midwife is not going to be able, like, she does a great job because she has 1 or 2 people. And that's the hard part, I think.
Yeah, it's a model of care conversation. And Dr. Crow came on, I don't remember how many months ago, for another episode. So if you want to listen to that, go listen to it. But yeah, we kind of dive into just the medical system in America and how, you know, you got to deal with what you got to deal with. But yeah, it's not ideal.
It's not. And for women in postpartum, and especially now, I just think it's stressful. And then you add COVID in, that's a whole podcast in itself, pregnancy and COVID and the vaccine
goodness.
and, oh my Lord. It's
Staying
just,
off social media.
I mean, it's been, it's the last year and a half and the last month with Delta, because it's affecting much more. I mean, last year, the pregnant women didn't get real sick. You know, I'd get a phone call, I have COVID. Okay, see you in 2 weeks. Call me if you need some changes. You know, it was that kind of deal. I mean, and now, I mean, we opened up a COVID antepartum unit for only pregnant women. We've got, I mean, it's doing a lot more. So right now, the anxiety, and then everybody, you know, a lot of the pregnant women 4 months ago weren't getting the COVID vaccine because it's just, we don't know the 5-year-long data. Well, now they're like, well, do I worry about the 5-year data or dying next month? And it's just,
it's extreme. I mean,
the anxiety right now is just, I mean, it's
Right.
out the roof. And the husbands are, you know, they're coming in and they're like, what do we do? And I'm like in here and going, y'all got to make this decision. I can't make this decision for you. You know, I mean,
asking about it.
Oh yeah, it's just hard, and they're looking at each other, and especially the new moms. I mean, they're I don't take Tylenol. Am I supposed to do this? And I'm like, oh gosh.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the crazy part about it, right? Is you do, if you do get education, you're like, I just spent 10 months not taking anything,
Right.
watching everything I put in my mouth because it's going to affect the baby, and then kind of at the end, you're like, let's throw all that out,
Yeah.
you know.
Here's
and
this.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's hard. It's
And you're
This is
so
gonna be fine.
scared
That's
about
gonna be
everything. Yeah. I remember asking you when I got pregnant with my first. I was like, "Can I have ice cream from a machine?" And you were like, "What?" I don't even know. You probably you see some people and you're like, "Go get a cute pregnancy book and stay off the internet." Just I mean, but that's the anxiety you feel.
yeah.
But that's
when
what I
you're
tell
pregnant.
everybody. I'm like, no internet. You only
Yeah.
get to read about what size your baby is and what fruit it looks
Right.
like. But do not
like,
go
I heard-
any chat rooms.
Oh,
No chat
man.
Like, I
rooms.
heard there's listeria.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's like I don't need that.
My favorite was the sleeping stuff. You know, it's like you try to figure out. And now we had a ton of issues, so you know, special case. But regardless, you're trying to figure out how to get your kid to go to sleep, and so you're like, no, everybody tells you 100 different things.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this one blog that I read, and it was like, you know, never put your kid in the bed. Always put your kid in the bed. Put your bed. Only sleep in a crib. Don't crib sleep. Put your crib in the bed with you. You know, it was like that was like the blog was just describing all of the ways in
Right.
which people give you advice, and
Right.
it's like it's
Right.
insanity.
Well,
But that's what you feel like.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean, and I tell people. I mean, I'm like, you do what works for you. I said, don't smother your baby. We got to go over those. I was like, beyond that, you survive. And I always laugh at people. I'm like, the first 6 months are survival, and you are in 100% survival mode, and you don't judge, and you just do whatever you can do to make it. And if you start drinking, if you want to hurt yourself, then we got to talk.
Right.
But beyond that, we're gonna get through it. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna get better.
But I think there's something comforting in just saying that it's okay to not. I remember you telling me when I came, I was like, you were like, I felt like you said, I didn't know if I ruined our lives when we had a second. Then I
Yeah.
had a third and I was better. I was like, there's so much peace in that.
Oh, yeah.
Like we just had a second. It's like, it's okay to feel like your head's chopped off and you don't really know what's happening because your
Yeah.
2-year-old's having a tantrum because you brought home a baby she never knew was even coming home.
Yeah.
And then you have this newborn that you're like, for me, I was like even grieving, you know, even the idea of grieving your birth story or like or in any part of postpartum, probably
Right.
you know, any stage you could say that, but like when you're trying to grieve or you're trying to understand why you're depressed and you don't recognize yourself, it's like,
Yeah.
it's okay to feel like things are chaotic.
Yeah. And that goes into like your situation. I mean, it's like I said, this is a whole nother podcast, but the person that got the C-section that wanted the vaginal delivery, or God forbid, they wanted the vaginal delivery unmedicated and got a C-section. Well, I failed. They failed. Everybody failed. And I'm like, nobody failed.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't what we wanted. I mean, heck, maybe I wanted to go to Harvard. I didn't. I went to Louisiana Tech. I think I came out okay, you know.
You did drive in the Yale campus,
I did
though, in the parking
through
lot.
trash and trash
Yeah.
can. But it's like, you know, that's the thing that for me really, that's the part where I guess that's where I think I have a struggle with the doctor telling patients what they need or do. I really try to take a more hands-off approach for delivery. Is like, listen, you
It
know,
sounds
this,
like it.
this happens all the time without us. Like, it happened way before I came along. It came way before doctors came along. Doctors didn't do deliveries. Midwives did, who just had delivered a bunch of babies. You know, I said, so we don't have to make a big deal of it. If you want pain medicine, you can pain medicine. If you don't, you don't. You know, and I always tell patients, I'm here for when the serious stuff happens. And that's where our trust is.
That's
And
so good.
because it is. I mean, I'm trained to get you out of a bad situation. I am not trained. I mean, I learned nothing midwife or granola in medical school.
Yeah.
Nothing.
We did the Bradley method with both of our kids.
Yeah.
And it was so nice to, you know, we had like six other couples with us, and everybody's birth went differently, but because everybody knew what to expect, then they could say to the doctor, well, what if we wait one more hour? And
Right.
the doctor would be like, nothing. I just wanted to do that because it's what, like.
Yeah.
And so, I think people need more information.
Right.
But they walk in thinking you have all the information.
Right.
And again, it's just that kind of thing of like, oh, I thought you knew all this.
Right.
And
that just comes with time.
Right.
Like even I can picture who I was 13 years ago to where I am now, and I would have never let a patient have unmonitored labor. Oh my God.
Okay.
The world's going to fall apart. And now I'm like, well, we can do it. We'll work through it, And then there's other patients that want it, and I'm like, you're not a candidate. I'm sorry, and I won't do that because
Yeah, that's
I
good.
cannot live with myself if I know I let you do something that was not smart.
That's good.
And then they'll look at me and say, well, I'm not using you. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. We weren't going to be a good team anyways.
Boundaries. Like, here's what I can do. And they're like, here's what I can't do.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that's what, and I always tell patients that. I'm like, there are certain things, I'm not getting in the bathtub with you. It's just not my thing. Like, I will not do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not trained to do it. And I don't want to do it. I just don't think it's
Like, have I mentioned I don't want to?
Yeah, I don't want to do it. And then it's like you're a
Sometimes
doctor.
I'm
You
not
have to
getting
do
into that.
you have to do everything I say or I want because I'm your patient. And I'm like, I don't though. And that's where I think it's hard in the doctor. Is you develop your style. And in the woman's clinic, the 7 of us have different styles. And some people like mine and some people don't. And you'll kind of, and you might like yours that didn't like this one. They switch to me and somebody leaves me and goes to one of my partners, which is nice. But that's probably one of the hardest things, I think, is trying to figure out how to let the patient have that freedom and autonomy and trying to be what they want. And I always laugh at patients, and I tell them this, but they'll be like, when do you want me to bring my birthing plan? And I'm like, whenever you want, And I'm like, are there things on there? Well, I haven't read it. So I'm going to look at it some more and I'll bring it to you. And I'm like, probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Probably a good idea. I need you to read your birthing plan
Yeah.
before you bring it to me. And then you'll have the other patients that come in with this extensive birthing plan. I'm like, it all looks good. I'm just going to tell you, it may not go this way, and we'll talk about it when we do, And that's just...
That's great.
Like, you get to have a plan, and you get to have a desire just like we all do. It's life. It doesn't go that way sometimes.
No, and it's not. I love what you're saying because I think that's the other problem that I'm seeing with a lot of things is just that one size fits all model.
Right.
People are like little hamster wheels that just come through, and it's like that's not how anybody is.
Right.
So be informed as a person when you go into your doctor because that's really helpful.
It is.
And also doctors like maybe listen to what your client's biology and history and trauma, and maybe just learn about what they, I was talking about that. I preached at a church this weekend and we were talking about masking and I was like, well, I don't really want to get into all that, but what you can do is ask people why they do or don't want to do something.
Right.
Is that complicated? Like if somebody doesn't want to get vaccinated, just say, okay, well, tell me about why you don't want to do that. Oh, well, we had a problem with the vaccine, or we had this, or my mom died from it, or oh, well, that makes sense for you, right? Or if I want to get vaccinated, well, I've never had any problems. I think this is the best thing. I have this information. Great, you do you.
Right.
But this is just culture of we have to judge and critique and give a one size fits all that everybody has to do this. It's
Right.
just crazy.
Well, and it just makes it hard. It does, and. The vaccine, I remember in that same situation, I got it 3 weeks ago. I get my second one on Friday, pray for me. But I hadn't gotten it. Everybody's like, you're a doctor. And I was like, y'all, I had my own doubts and fears. I'd already had COVID. I was like, I am kind of granola. But I literally got to the point where I did that. I asked myself, I said, why are you not getting this, Laurie? And I was like, I think I'm being a turd. Like, I think I'm just doing it because it's like I felt kind of pushed, and I'm a little bit of I don't like to be pushed. I kind of like to do my own thing. And I finally was like, okay, you're not making a smart decision, and you're just being a stinker. And I went and got it, but it was like I had to stop and ask myself that. But I'd gotten in such a role of, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And then finally I was like, I don't think I've really made this decision. I just kind of followed what everybody else was saying that was on this fence. And, and I think taking the time, I've had a couple of patients that we've talked about, and by talking through their fears, some of them have said, oh, you know what, it probably is okay. And others, I'm like, yeah, I understand 100%, but it's just taking the time, I think, to listen. And I do with my patients sometimes, they'll sit there and they'll sit down, I always say the 16-week visit, we sit there and we stare at each other, because there's not a lot going on. You don't do an ultrasound usually, and they're sitting there and they're looking at me and I'm like, how you feeling? They're like, good. I'm like, okay, good.
Life is so good at that point.
Yeah. It really is. And there's nothing going on. They can't feel the baby move.
Past the 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Feel a little safer.
You're not sick anymore. You're feeling a little better. And we're both staring at each other. And I'm like, I got nothing to talk about. There's nothing going on right now. So when they come in and they're like, I got questions, I'm like, beautiful. Lay them on me, because like I can fill this void because there's just nothing happening. I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think bringing those questions does help, because if I have to tell you about pregnancy, you need a book. Like, I don't have time to, well, what the patient sits down and says, what do I need to know about pregnancy? And I'm like, oh, okay. That's a long conversation. So I break it up.
So many things that
and so I have it all broke up for each little bit. But it is nice, like you said, when patients come in and they sit down and they talk, and I have time to listen, and we kind of work through some stuff. And
I'd say that for therapy too. If you go into therapy, think about maybe what happened the week before.
Right, that you want to talk about.
Walk in and be like, totally didn't think that I was about my session.
I have like a goal planning session. Like, I'll call it like a dream session. Like, if you could get anything, I'm like, so what's your, like, when do you figure me done with counseling? I have some that are like, when am I going to be done? I'm like, where are we working towards that? They're just kind of, I'm not saying I'm not trying to kick you out. It's just like, where are we going with this?
That's true.
And so
it's like, the TV show, you sit on the couch and they're like, okay. So how was your childhood? It's like, I don't know where to start. Like, do we really get deep into this, or should we just move forward?
Right.
Yep.
Like, where is this going to go?
But
a good therapist will direct you and help you a little bit.
There's a balance. I mean, I think it's, you're kind of talking, like, what's it like, we as therapists have an expertise and training, especially with how we look at trauma and how we have all those things, but then also bring the client in and say what you have to say is important, because you have a first-hand view of your life. Mm-hmm. But then even like, okay, so so much about babies and how, gestational and what needs to happen for them, but then also they get to have thoughts and opinions that come in, and so how to marry those two and make sure there's a good balance of like how to trust each other in that process.
Well, it's just a relationship.
It is.
Right? I mean, it's a little reciprocal relationship. I mean, I think if we, again, stop getting caught up in the world's view of everything and just go, okay, I'm a person who loves you, who cares about you, who wants to disciple you in some way and make sure you feel safe and loved and valued, then that means you do the same thing, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer. Now, what you do after that, right, will be your job.
Right.
But I think what we're missing in our culture is that first instant relationship part where it's like, you're a human, I'm a human. Let's get to know that just a little bit.
Right.
And then everything else will kind of fall out of that. And what's unique about therapy is that that's all we do. It's like we get to spend the whole hour making it about you, hearing about your story, thinking specifically about it. And so I love for doctors like you, we have a chiropractor here, we have doctors, we have dietitians, because then they know that they can say, okay, well, this is my job. I'm going to do my lane. I'm going to kind of touch on that. And then I'm going to send you over here to get the full thing. And then we can call you and say, hey, they're coming back for their checkup, or they, missed their period, or they're having a really hard time with this trigger because they had a miscarriage. And then, you know what you're getting instead of it always coming in.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, I know we had a bunch of stuff on fertility and recurrent miscarriages and all that. And I mean, that's a whole, I deal with that, and it's hard because, you sit there and, we have to jump from room to room to room. Mm-hmm. And so like I see this room and this one's a new pregnancy. Great. We're excited. You go to this room and it's a new pregnancy and, it passed. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay. And so you have to turn that off to go here. And then you go to this room and they're happy because they just had their baby, and your brain's going like this.
Like roller coaster you're on.
It is. But it's like, I remember leaving my nurse before and walking in the room and like, did that okay? Like, how do you deliver that? Right. And so then the patient's sitting there and, the patients, I've had patients tell me, they're like, I know you see it all the time. And I'm like, I do, but it's you. Like, you don't. And so today is your day. Like, this is your time to grieve over this stuff.
That's good.
But those are those moments where women, and God forbid they compare the 6-week loss to the 36-week loss. And I'm like, it's a loss. Yes, it's a different, and I can't tell you either one of those of what you're supposed to feel or not feel, But those are moments when...
It's significant.
Well, and those are the moments where, I'm like, some people handle it, where they just kind of never miss a beat. And then you have others that they need therapy, and that's where I'm always like, this is where we need somebody where I can be like, okay, I'm getting you into her tomorrow. That's where that integrated part is needed, because those are those moments where I'm like, I don't have time, and she probably needs another 45 minutes. And then her husband that didn't come, he's going to need another 45 minutes, and those are those hard times.
For a couple months.
Right. It is. And then the next one, the next pregnancy, they're a basket case.
Yep. I think October, I can't remember the date, but I'm having a lady come in who does a miscarriage, infant loss ministry here in Shreveport. And we're going to do a whole podcast on miscarriage and infant loss and the pros and the cons, not the pros and the cons, but like the costs, and the trauma and all the things that come from it.
Yeah. It's a big one. We've seen a lot of it lately too. So it's just been, that's one I feel like you need your own special setting at that. It's like, I remember us talking at one time, do we need a separate waiting room even, for those women that are coming up for those follow-ups? And then you're like, or do you isolate them by putting them in a separate room, and it's just, and you're sitting here playing that game with yourself. And I'm like, what do we need?
Yeah. Like how to best care.
And you
for
ask
people.
patients patients, but because patients handle it different, some say, yes, I'd like a separate waiting room. Other like, oh no, don't put me in the lost a baby waiting room. And
Yeah.
Right. They don't
how
see
do you
like
do
the
it
joy
right?
of everybody else having their baby. You're grieving your own. And that's one thing that we don't have time to get all into it today. But just one idea of trauma. And we talked about this when we came to Met, like, what is that? And so you've talked about this all the time on your podcast, but like, it's not like those big T traumas and those little T traumas. Those, you tend to think like, okay, like a 36-week loss of your baby is, that's huge. And so, but you can identify that's trauma, but then what are the other things, even like that 6 week of like the traumatic sense of, I didn't know how come it didn't happen? How come I didn't have this baby? And even when I wanted, like, with my birth story and the grief I had was not so much the C-section, just how it all happened, just like the idea of like wanting to be there for your child. And just like there's so much to it and these expectations. And so the trauma that can come with as a woman and feeling like this is what my body's supposed to do. Right. And it failed in whatever sense that could be. And so, and we don't really get to get into that, but it's just, I think the trauma of one, having things happen that you don't have control over, which is what a lot of miscarriage, like you don't have any control.
Right.
That's a loss. I think even like you look at menopausal women, you don't have any control over those things. I think those things I wish we could get more into, we just don't have time at the moment. But I just, for people listening, that it's okay to say you've been through some traumatic stuff, even if it's common. Yeah. Right. Even if it happens to, is it 1 in 3 women with a miscarriage? Is that the statistic?
1 in 4 to 5.
Okay. So it's that's pretty high.
Oh, it's all, and that's why I say it all the time. Yeah. Every day, but it doesn't make it any different for that person because they don't go through it 5 times a day.
Right.
And so
and for people to just remember, that lasts a long time. Like you said, the next pregnancy, the next time you have it, the next period, it can be years or so. And even if you're dealing, I think what I would say from a clinical perspective is just because you're still struggling with something doesn't mean something's wrong.
Right.
You should struggle with it.
Right.
You had a loss. You're going to grieve, and grief's going to take time. And it'll be forever. I have a little, some little feet on my keychain from one of our miscarriages. And, every once in a while I'll see it and it'll hit me the wrong way. Or, I was telling Mary Kate earlier, we were going to walk. She used the office for a client before we walked in for the podcast. And so she had shut the door on the way out. And then she was like, is Brandy here? Because I used her office. And I was like, I don't know. So I went to open it. And when we were talking about it, I was like, oh, I remembered, because it's a huge deal in therapy not to open the door or knock or disrupt a session. Well, I remembered my administrator, I was at a session and somebody banged on my door and my wife was having a miscarriage. And so I jumped up, grabbed my stuff and ran out. And just now, before we did this podcast, just talking about that, I haven't thought about that or remembered that happened until today.
Right.
And I was like, whoo, that's trigger. It just kind of hit me in my gut of like sitting here, like remembering that moment, So those things, and that was, a year and a half ago. So it's like, those things continue to happen and you continue to, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's part of processing. Even after I had my son, my mom was at my house. Like, there would be times I would just cry and just talk about it. And there's something so good about, like, I'm going to cry and try to process this because I don't know what it meant for me. And that's what we do with our clients all day. And what you're saying is like, okay, so this meant something to you. So when you have a reaction, that makes sense. But this was a weighty thing. And it really, like, this is just your body telling you information.
It mattered.
It mattered. And it's okay to feel that. Doesn't mean that you're less. And I think sometimes we spend so much time trying to fix everything to make it better. And it's like, it's okay to be there, and it's okay for it to not have gone the way that you wanted, and it's gonna suck. You don't want to be there, you don't want your clients to be there. But it's like, let's just allow yourself to be there because it's gonna come out in some way. Whether it's if you don't handle this, what's going on for you now, it'll come back up in another pregnancy or whatever it could be. And this idea of the body keeping score,
Well, and you'll see it. After they have another baby, even just the fragility of it. Their own, the anxiety, that postpartum anxiety. I'll see a lot of those patients that finally they got the baby and then they can't even handle it because it's like it's been such a battle that once they have this baby and they're at home and they're I'm supposed to like this more, and why is it so hard? And I've been trying so hard to get here, and
I should love it.
I should love everything about it, and then why am I not grateful right now? And I'm like, it's okay, because now you're at a new step. This is
I saw this thing yesterday, and it said toxic parenting or toxic motherhood versus healthy motherhood, and I didn't get through all of it, but it was like the first thing was like enjoy every single moment.
Yeah,
was toxic motherhood, and it's like that's so true. You can't. The other one was like, you're not going to like your kids sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I
like,
texted moms the other day. I was like, do you ever not like your kid?
yeah.
Like, I just, this is normal. I mean,
like
I love her, but.
Or a stage. Like, I don't like this stage of it, you know? Like, there's different periods. Like, I'm not the baby. I don't love the baby stage. And I'm like, I just rather go to work. But now, once they're talking and moving, I'm like, ooh, this is where I like it.
Yeah.
You know, like, I love to interact and do. But it's
okay to have those things there.
Yeah. And that's where I feel like, you know, with that, the trauma of that, of dealing and having a way to talk about it. We have a little grief, I don't know, it's not a company, but group that does stuff with loss in our town. And, you know, we can give stuff. But even there, they're like, sometimes within that grief group, I don't think there's a counselor that leads it. It's just women that get together. But one feels less adequate to be there than the other one because this one had this loss or this one didn't or this
they
one.
They start comparing each other's losses.
But on themselves.
Right.
Like the other ones, everybody's okay, but it's just that same thing, you know, and it's just hard.
Man, we do that big time, that comparing our traumas, man. Can't do it.
It's hard. I mean, y'all can probably see that all the time, but.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, this was great.
Oh, good.
Tell me any closing comments or thoughts that you'd like people to know, or any kind of things that came up that.
Yeah, I mean, I really think, we hit on a lot, and I don't even know what we hit on.
And I feel the same way. I'm like, I hope that was helpful.
But I really do want, for me, for women, what I'm just really striving now to tell everybody is you have to slow down. You have to slow down. You have to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself doesn't mean you have to go out and exercise and join a CrossFit gym and, you know, do an hour and a half exercise 7 days a week and eat perfect. You know, it just means feeding your soul of what needs something, you know, spiritual, or whether it's with friends, whatever it is, but you need to surround yourself with things that are healthy. You know, so from the food, from your friends, from your community, to your family members. If you have unhealthy family members that don't do well with you, don't hang out with them all the time and try to make it work.
Yeah,
like, it's
good.
just,
Boundaries.
that's boundaries. I tell ladies all the time, I'm like, you have to find time for yourself that does something that makes your soul better. Because when your soul's better, you're going to shine, and the people are going to just attract to you. You know, your children are going to feel better when you feel better. And so you just, if that means you don't get to be on the PTA, don't be on the PTA. Turn it down. Just say, I can't do this today. I can't add that extra thing in. If that means you can't make the muffins that week, you don't make the muffins that week. You know, if it means you have to turn down a job or, you know, going on a meeting somewhere out of town because you know you're going to miss something, then turn it down. But slow down and really enjoy the time that you have every day, and find some point in the day. It's gratitude, I guess. But, you know, I don't know. That's, to me, is what I've tried to really start pushing into my patients. Even the young girls, they get so lost sometimes. I'm like, have you sat and hung out with your mom? Or who's your favorite person? You know, what's your favorite thing to do? Go do it for 15 minutes. Not an hour. Just start small.
That's
you
so
know?
good.
So
That's really good.
Thanks.
Mary Kate, you got anything?
You got to follow that up.
I know, it's like so much pressure. I think ultimately in my heart, for even with Dr. Blue coming, was like, you're not alone. So I think even like what you're saying, like, who are you with? It's kind of like, how cool to be, especially as women, but men too. It's like the idea of being vulnerable about kind of where we're at doesn't make you weak. Vulnerability does not equal weakness. It's really coming alongside people, which God created us for. And the pandemic has shown that we need people because we weren't supposed to do this life alone. It's very hard to do it alone, especially that anxiety and depression, even postpartum, any period. That's, you know, when it's that loneliness. And so how do we do life authentically with people that says, this is hard. It's okay for it to be hard. And we're going to get through it, you know? And I think, you know, that's being able to talk to your doctor about it and going to therapy, you know, like, or if it's developing really good friends that you know that you can commit to that and being authentic. I just say you find those places where you can have that, like where it does nourish your soul in some ways that, you know, getting that next promotion or looking perfect or social media is just never going to do for us. It never will, as much as we try.
Yeah.
So,
and be kind.
Yeah, please.
Just be nice.
Just be kind.
Yep.
That works really
Yeah.
throughout the 17 to the 70-year-old.
Yeah, especially to other women.
Yeah.
You know, pull each other up, you know, pick each other up. And
Men don't do that.
not as much.
No, not
You know,
all
there's
women.
a Jordan Peterson. We were talking about that before, but he says this thing. He said from an evolutionary biological, it's been kind of talked about that it's because men risk getting punched in the face. And so it's just kind of an idea that, like, not that a woman won't punch you, but like women tend to be more catty or gossipy or, you know, long-term manipulative, but like guys don't do it because there's a risk always of violence. So if like a guy will pop off and say something, the next time you see him, you maybe get hit in the mouth.
Right.
You know, like,
Isn't
so
that wild?
yeah, it's crazy, but I don't know if
More
that's true or not.
aggression
But
on
it's
the
like,
other.
well, it's just like, you know, I don't know, you're women. I'll ask you, do you ever worry about like another woman walking up and punching you?
Not all the time.
Right. Yeah.
You're like, I don't know, maybe.
You assess the situation and you're like, yeah.
Right, but I mean, but if you're in
But
Walmart
no.
or Target, and
No, but I
you're
can
gonna
tell you,
say
you worry about somebody talking about you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, always.
Yeah.
It's like,
Exactly.
oh, she's going to say something
Yeah.
about this later.
Exactly.
when I'm
Where
not-
men, like, we typically think, like, well, I don't want to pop off in the parking lot because he might punch
Right.
me. You know, like, so it's
Yeah.
just an interesting dynamic.
That is an
of-
interesting thought, like,
Yeah.
to think of it that
Yeah.
way.
I mean, that makes sense.
Aggression.
You kind of hear those stereotypical, like in high school, like guys just fighting and they're over it, whereas girls spend like 3 years dragging it out to like make you really feel it, and you're
Yeah.
like, but you can't call them out because it's so manipulative.
You're still hanging on to the high school person that was mean to you, and I'm like, where are they now?
Right. I'm like, I'm a grown woman.
Yeah. Poor Susie in 8th grade said this about my braces. You're like a supermodel, you know, like a supermodel Miss America, and you're like, that's Susie. You're like texting her pictures of you winning.
Right.
No,
right.
I mean, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, right?
Right.
But yeah, anyway, we'll end on that.
Okay.
Okay, guys, listen to podcasts wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Thank you so much, Dr. Lebleu,
welcome.
for
Thanks
coming
for
on.
having
Mary
me.
Kate, proud of you. Great job.
Thanks.
And all the ladies out there, y'all keep being healthy and listen to our other episodes. Go through them. We're going to do another one about miscarriages in October coming up. And next week, we're doing one on the Enneagram. So
fun.
a couple of Enneagram coaches coming in to talk about that. So God bless you guys and have a good week.